The Mute at Hogwarts. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination. So don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author. We are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like. And if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 351 Voldemort's Infinite Bestiality. How long can you control him? Adriana asked. By this time, the cats Adriana and Guan Qiong had reached the edge of the Forbidden Forest, far from Hogwarts Castle. Even if Pettigrew completely erupted there, it wouldn't have much of an impact. At most, it would attract the surrounding Dementors. Not for long, Guan Qiong's eyes showed pessimism. If he remembered correctly, Voldemort was currently in a vast forest, preserving his soul fragments by parasitizing one snake after another. This, in turn, fueled his bestiality, leading him to greater madness. This was probably why, in Guan Qiong's memories, the later Voldemort appeared nowhere near the wisdom of the younger Voldemort, sealed in the diary in the second film. He was tainted by bestiality, and it had penetrated deep into his soul. Of course, this made him even more dangerous, even more like a madman. But now, that bestiality was being continuously channeled into Pettigrew through that strange magic, giving him the power to fight against Guan Qiong and Adriana. So, that's it? Let him go? Let him fend for himself. Black might feel better knowing he's dead, even if it wasn't his own doing, Adriana said. No, if we let him go now, Pettigrew's instincts for self-preservation and animalistic nature will drive him to Voldemort's side. He won't die, he'll just return to Voldemort. Compared to the excretion of animalistic desires, a useful servant is more important to Voldemort right now, Guan Qiong shook her head. But we can't control him now, Adriana said. The black ball in the air, formed by Guan Qiong and Adriana's tentacles, was growing larger and larger. The tentacles emerging from Guan Qiong had reached their limit. Although he possessed incredible talent and strength far superior to that of ordinary wizards, he was still inferior to this power he had yet to fully understand, and to Voldemort. More importantly, Guan Qiong had to dissipate the animalistic energy surging from there and prevent it from contaminating him. This was far more difficult than a normal battle, a meticulous and exhausting task. Yes, I can't control him. I still don't understand the power of the beast, Guan Qiong sighed, then retracted his tentacles. But we can't let him go like this. We must lock him here, not only for Sirius, but also to contain Voldemort. Guan Qiong's eyes suddenly glowed with a silver light, like the moon in the sky. A cold, chilling aura emanated from him. He untied the tentacles binding Peter Pettigrew, revealing the rat within. At this moment, black smoke continuously flowed from the rat's body, forming the shape of a beast's head. Guan Qiong's tentacles stood upright, and silver dust emerged from their tips. They then gathered together, forming a ball. Under Guan Qiong's control, like plasticine, they gradually transformed into humanoid form. It was Guan Qiong radiating a silver light. It was as if a giant had awakened at this moment. A sense of majesty filled the hearts of the three present. It was not due to sheer power, but to something deeper, a kind of suppression brought from the depths of life. A patroness imbued with divinity. Under Guan Qiong's control, the patroness pounced upon the beastly shadows on the mice. Like light and darkness, the two merged with astonishing speed. But the black aura emanating from Peter Pettigrew seemed endless. And Guan Qiong had no intention of helping Voldemort devour too much of the beastly energy. The silver patroness plunged directly into the beastly maw, then pointed a finger at the forehead of the center mouse. The next second, light and darkness exploded, the massive impact sending all three animals flying. Scabbers, the mouse, suddenly awoke, his eyes regaining consciousness, and he controlled his body to run across the grass. Guan Qiong did not pursue, and instead stopped Adriana from pursuing him. He won't leave. I've left a trace of divinity within his consciousness. Now, entangled in the beastly energy, he craves the balance of divinity, Guan Qiong explained to Adriana's puzzled gaze. And if we provoke him again, the magic that was just locked away will be reactivated. We would then be helping Voldemort to purge his bestiality, and that's not what we want. Now, take me to see Sirius. Guan Qiong looked towards the dark Forbidden Forest. Follow me. Adriana glanced in the direction Peter Pettigrew had just fled, feeling a little annoyed, but she didn't say anything else. She simply turned around and led the way. Let him be afraid a little longer. Fear is a good punishment, Guan Qiong counseled Adriana. His tentacles retracted, merging into the shape of cat paws, making him look like an ordinary black cat. Of course, this form was unconventional and made him feel a little uncomfortable, like his hands and feet squeezed together. His most comfortable animagus form was with all 8 tentacles spread out. Any other form, whether more or fewer, would feel a little strange. The 2 cats walked, one in front of the other, toward the forbidden forest. At night, the trees swayed like demons, their branches waving in a terrifying manner. The sound of the wind rustling through the leaves was like the whispers of a monster. It wasn't long before Guan Qiong spotted Sirius Black. He was bound to a thick tree trunk by vines, resembling a giant black bear. He's been in his animagus form for too long, and coupled with his obsession with Peter Pettigrew, he's completely lost to his bestial nature, Adriana sighed. Guan Qiong took a few steps forward, approaching Sirius. His legs transformed back into tentacles, extending continuously, supporting his body as he rose to a position level with Sirius's head. Sirius' eyes were clouded, replaced by a kind of instinctive madness. Upon seeing Guan Qiong, he roared, his huge mouth stretched out to bite Guan Qiong, and his body began to struggle frantically. At this moment, he truly lived up to the Ministry of Magic's description, a dangerous madman. But this madness had no effect on Guan Qiong. More tentacles began to emerge from his body. 2 of them grabbed Sirius' mouth and held it there, while the other 2 reached into Sirius' ears, as if trying to drill into his head. Other tentacles hovered in front of his eyes, as if looking for an angle to attack. Chapter 352, Resolving the Animal Nature. Guan Qiong, Adriana asked uneasily. Even with her vast experience, she couldn't quite tell which was more frightening in the scene unfolding before her. Don't worry, it's just necessary tests and treatments. A tentacle reached out to Adriana, emitting a message of light. In theory, Adriana was Guan Qiong's teacher, teaching her about the divine and bestial natures, and passing on the Sheffic family's research findings. However, in practice and understanding, Guan Qiong now surpassed Adriana. In a true sense, on the path of divine and bestial natures, Adriana had failed, while Guan Qiong had advanced further, even potentially reaching the end. After all, Guan Qiong had already condensed the divine patroness charm, while Adriana was still entangled in the curses of bestiality and dark magic. Guan Qiong looked at Sirius Black before her with a serious look. Divinity and bestiality could counteract and neutralize each other, that was certain, but how to do so was a thorny matter. After all, if he unleashed the patroness charm now, the bestiality in Sirius would be eliminated, but Sirius's soul would also be impacted. Therefore, a more gentle approach was needed. Thinking of this, a faint silver light began to emanate from Guan Qiong's tentacles, like dust particles, dotting Sirius' body. Sirius' eyes instantly turned red, and a mad dark aura similar to that of Peter Pettigrew appeared, instantly extinguishing and shattering the dust particles. At the same time, the aura also wanted to infect Guan Qiong along the tentacles, but was crushed by Guan Qiong's magical vibrations. Guan Qiong was not discouraged at all. More dust particles appeared, dotting Sirius' body along certain specific locations, like wildfires in the wilderness. Although small, they could form a prairie fire by interacting with each other. Bit by bit, the dust shattered, and Sirius's animal nature intensified, yet it felt like it was losing its momentum. Gradually, the divine power emanating from Guan Qiong intensified, while Sirius's animal nature gradually weakened, finally shattering like thin paper under Guan Qiong's gentle touch. Guan Qiong simultaneously retracted her tentacles from Sirius and reduced the output of her divine power, lest it affect Sirius's soul and cause him to lose his emotions. Peter Pettigrew did have some effect. At least he's helped me verify a method of using divine power to dissolve the animal nature. Finally, after withdrawing all the tentacles, Guan Qiong breathed a sigh of relief, a mixture of emotion and emotion. If it weren't for the brutal experiment she'd just done on Pettigrew, Guan Qiong wouldn't have been so confident. Has Sirius recovered? Adriana asked worriedly, approaching Sirius. Sirius had closed his eyes, and the frenzied, animalistic feeling had vanished. He's recovered. Stay with him more for the time being. Group contact slows the growth of his bestial nature. I've recently discovered this. As for Peter Pettigrew, wait until he's fully recovered before dealing with him. Then you'll have a clear mind to explain everything to Harry, Guan Qiong instructed. Otherwise, Harry would still believe that Sirius Black had murdered his parents, and in that situation, Sirius would sooner or later relapse. If Harry accepted Sirius as his godfather, with a loving presence of family, things would be much better. I understand, Adriana nodded. Guan Qiong glanced at the dim sky, yawned tiredly, and walked towards Hogwarts Castle. Adriana didn't have classes and could sleep during the day, but he had classes tomorrow, the first period, so he had to go back and catch up on some sleep to avoid being unable to wake up. Hermione, is your hat the same one you wore last time, in the library? Ron looked at Hermione's hat with curiosity. Why did it look like she was sleeping, with her ears moving up and down? Keep your voice down, Hermione said, reaching out to touch the cat's head, her eyes warning. It was unclear whether this was because they were in the library or for some other reason. All right, Ron said quietly, still curiously eyeing the hat on Hermione's head. It felt a little strange no matter how one looked at it. Furthermore, Guan Qiong wasn't with them today. No one knew where she'd gone. She disappeared the moment get out of class was over. I wonder what's going on with Buckbeak's case? We've looked up so much information, but I don't know if it's any use, Harry suddenly said. Buckbeak is a griffin. Because it injured Malfoy during Hagrid's Care of Magical Creatures class, it's considered dangerous. The case regarding its proper handling is currently underway in London. If the information they've found so far is useful, Buckbeak will win the case, and nothing will happen to it. But if they lose? Harry shook his head, not daring to think about that outcome. After all, in their view, Malfoy's injury was entirely deserved. It was he who provoked the griffin, and he was usually a bad guy, a villain. He deserved the injury. We'll definitely win. We've found numerous examples proving that griffins and other magical creatures don't attack humans voluntarily, but rather because they're threatened or harmed. And that's exactly what Malfoy did back then. He insulted it, Ron said confidently. If the magical creatures survive those cases, we'll be fine this time too. That's true, but you know, Malfoy's father is very powerful. He has a group of pure-blood families who are willing to listen to him, and those families hold positions in various departments of the Ministry of Magic. Hermione was a little pessimistic, but still held out a glimmer of hope. If Buckbeak's judgment this time really had been influenced by Malfoy's father and turned unfair, then when she finally joined the Ministry of Magic, or even became Minister of Magic as Guan Qiong had said, she would have to clean out all those people, sweeping them into the trash like garbage. Just wait for the news. The results will be out soon. I hope it's not bad, or I won't be in the mood to do my homework, Ron said. You didn't want to write it anyway, Ron. Well, actually, neither did I. God knows why Snape wanted us to write a paper on the applications of daffodil petals. There aren't many uses for them. Only people with insomnia would use them, Harry said helplessly. And there's also a wolfsbane potion, Hermione added. Chapter 353 Divination Lesson. Things didn't go as Hermione and the others had imagined. When Guan Qiong woke up and the group was about to go to divination class, Hagrid delivered some bad news. They lost the case, and Buckbeak was allowed to be taken back to Hogwarts, where he would meet his end. How dare they do this? Those people are disgusting. On the way to divination class, Hermione was rarely angry. But what can we do? The verdict has been made, Ron said somewhat dejectedly. He knew the strictness of the Ministry of Magic's laws. Once a verdict was made, they would not accept any more appeals, even if they later discovered that their verdict was wrong. Because it would threaten their dignity and affect the seriousness of the law. Harry looked at Guan Qiong, wanting him to think of a solution. Guan Qiong simply shrugged. Normally, there's nothing we can do. After all, this world belongs to adults, and we're just children. He glanced at the angry Hermione beside him, and the array of light dots suddenly transformed into another line of text. Of course, sometimes, when a creature returns to its own group, it's hard for us to notice the difference. Hermione looked thoughtful, her eyes suddenly brightening as she looked at Guan Qiong. I didn't say anything, Guan Qiong smiled, covering his mouth with both hands, but the light dots floated in front of him, conveying his meaning. Let's go to divination first. During the next magical creatures class, we'll go see Hagrid. He must be heartbroken. We need to comfort him. We need his help with some things. Okay, Hermione nodded, and Harry and Ron followed. They arrived at Professor Trelawney's divination classroom, a semicircular space in a separate tower. The rich aroma of spices, combined with the dim light cast by heavy curtains, gave the place an oppressive, mysterious atmosphere. However, To Guan Qiong and Hermione, this was simply a psychological manipulation technique. Hermione had originally disliked divination, finding it too mysterious, but Guan Qiong enlightened her, explaining that politics bore some resemblance to it, and so Hermione took it seriously. They're all very skilled at using rhetoric to manipulate others, whether they're superiors or subordinates, Guan Qiong said. Divination class went on as usual, with no major surprises. Professor Trelawney had already discussed crystal ball divination. Although Guan Qiong saw it as a magical tool that randomly dispersed injected magic power, creating strange patterns, Professor Trelawney still taught them some interpretation methods. For example, seeing a triangle indicated the possibility of being harmed by a sharp object in the coming days, but protecting oneself was crucial. Seeing clouds, however, signaled a period of leisure and relaxation. However, if you saw triangular clouds, beware, it signified someone lurking beneath your comfort zone, ready to strike the most devastating blow when you're most relaxed. Divination class proceeded normally, just like any other. However, after class, Professor Trelawney, dressed in artistic attire, asked Guan Qiong to stay. He sent the other three to Hagrid's Care of Magical Creatures class, while he remained in the dimly lit, strangely scented classroom. Glad to see you've cleared your mind. I thought you'd be disoriented by time and consumed by it, Professor Trelawney said with a smile to the bewildered Guan Qiong. From Guan Qiong's magical perspective, the magical circuits within her body shifted slightly, connecting two gaps. Guan Qiong also sensed a certain divinity within her. Professor Trelawney, the question mark formed by the light in front of Guan Qiong lingered. It's me, and it's not me. On a path to the gods, I, like the other person beside you, have lost my way. But she's trapped physically, while I'm trapped spiritually, Professor Trelawney said with a smile. She was completely different now than she had been in class just now. Her eyes held confidence and wisdom, and her words evoked conviction. Compared to the Trelawney from earlier, she seemed more like a true divination teacher, a descendant of the legendary diviner. Divinity, humanity, and animality, Guan Qiong asked hesitantly. No, that's her understanding. While we share some similarities, our paths are different, Trelawney shook his head. My path is the trinity of ego, id, and superego, seeking transcendence. Unfortunately, I've lost myself in it, and only the aura of certain other paths can awaken me slightly. Professor Trelawney looked at Guan Qiong with sincerity. Ego, id, and superego? Guan Qiong pondered this, and began to understand. These shared similarities with animality, humanity, and divinity to some extent, and their manifestations were somewhat similar, but their paths were different. Taking Professor Trelawney before her as an example, it was clear that the current Professor Trelawney was the normal Professor Trelawney, the rational form, the id form. But when she delved too deeply, searching for her original self, she began to lose her sanity and wisdom, her understanding of divination, and became a con man, only able to deceive others with rhetoric. When she delved into her superego, she reached the state in which she made astonishing predictions. She successfully predicted the Dark Lord's appearance, the ability of a July-born child to fight him, and even his return. This prophetic ability was unparalleled in the world. However, that state was beyond her control, completely devoid of thought and emotion, even inferior to the divine state Guan Qiong had pursued. It had become a manifestation of the laws of prophecy. So, Professor Trelawney, what do you need from me? Guan Qiong asked with a light. Previously, when he was trapped in the mystery of time, it was Professor Trelawney's prophecy that provided him with some clues, allowing him to understand the choice he needed to face and awaken him. After so much exploration, he gradually understood the choice before him. Therefore, Professor Trelawney had helped him, and now that he was meeting him in this state, it was clear that he had something to say. In a certain state, I once saw the future of this world, although I cannot explain it. Professor Trelawney looked at Guan Qiong, his tone filled with expectation. In that future, I did not recover. I was completely lost, and you are not on that future. Chapter 354 Variables. You are a variable, child. Such things are rare, but they do happen. Professor Trelawney looked at Guan Qiong with a wise gaze. Guan Qiong listened calmly. I don't know why you became that variable, and I don't need to know. The only thing is that you can change the future I saw before, Professor Trelawney continued, then stated her ultimate goal. So, I hope, or rather, ask you, when you make that choice, when you change the future, you can help me and free me. Professor Trelawney said. I don't know how to do it. Our paths are different. The silver light in front of Guan Qiong turned into a line of text. But our destination is the same. When you reach the destination, you will be able to see all the paths. Then, with just a slight reminder, you can help a lost person escape the maze. I believe that person has the same idea, Professor Trelawney said. Guan Qiong knew she was referring to Adriana. In fact, Adriana had said something similar. When Guan Qiong was trying to help her remove the curse that sealed her body, Adriana told him not to waste time. He just had to keep going until he reached the end of the path, and the solution would naturally appear. At the time, he simply thought that if he could complete the Sheffic family research, he would be able to help Adriana, who was having trouble on that path. But now, according to Professor Trelawney, after completing the path, one could actually see all paths clearly. It seemed like something a god could truly achieve. From another dimension, another level, looking back at the original path, everything would become clear, just like someone reaching the top of a mountain seeing the path up. Not only would one's own path be clearly visible, but also the paths others were taking, allowing them to avoid obstacles along the way. I understand. If that day ever comes, I will help you, Professor Trelawney. Guan Qiong thought for a moment, nodded, and agreed. It seems you've already made your choice. I hope you can follow the path you've chosen all the way to the end, Professor Trelawney said meaningfully. Then, her eyes blinked rapidly, a weariness appearing in them, as if she were tired. A strange, subtle cloudiness appeared in her eyes, as if some shortcut in her brain had been shut down again. Well, then, goodbye, Professor. Guan Qiong understood that this was the return of Professor Trelawney, the most common one, who had left wisdom and knowledge. She stood up, nodded to Professor Trelawney, and left the classroom down the stairs. By the time Guan Qiong returned to care of magical creatures, the class had already started, but Hagrid didn't say anything, simply telling him to return. Hagrid wasn't in good condition. His eyes were a little red and swollen, which was unusual for the half-giant. It was obvious that he had cried for a long time, many times, which had caused such a condition in his strong body. I was so dumb. I couldn't understand a word they said. They were talking about the Danger Act, ancient precedents, things I'd heard you talk about before, but in their mouths, they took on the opposite meaning, turning them into something bad for Buckbeak. The care of magical creatures class wasn't going particularly well. Hagrid was completely consumed by self-blame and didn't seem to pay much attention in class. Fortunately, it was almost the end of the semester, and everyone was much more tolerant of this elective. Especially since Hagrid had announced that the final paper only needed to offer some advice on protecting magical creatures. After class, Hagrid spoke with the others, saying sadly, then Lucius Malfoy stood up and said something else. I couldn't understand or remember it. It was so convoluted, and it seemed to use some strange, peculiar grammar. But when he finished, everyone applauded, and then the committee announced its verdict. Hagrid spoke with a dull smile, tears threatening to fall. I'm so stupid. If I'd been smarter, if I'd spoken a little more, things wouldn't have turned out like this, Hagrid said, covering his face with a handkerchief. You're just too honest, Guan Qiong soothed, but Hagrid couldn't see the words. Don't worry, Hagrid, we have other options, Hermione said from the side. Yet, we're going to appeal. We're going to expose Lucius's control of the committee and expose it in the Daily Prophet so everyone can see their true character, Ron said fiercely. Although he had just told Guan Qiong and Hermione that the committee's decision would not be changed, he spoke indignantly, trying to comfort Hagrid with these words. It's no use. We can't change anything. Buckbeak is beyond saving, but Hagrid just cried, his huge body now looking helpless. Hermione looked at Guan Qiong worriedly and opened her mouth to tell her the solution Guan Qiong had just mentioned, but Guan Qiong held her hand. I just thought about it. If Hagrid knew about this, it wouldn't be easy to hide. He's too honest, and his flaws would be discovered. Guan Qiong shook her head, and the light drifted in front of Hermione. And if Hagrid didn't know, and it was just us doing it, it's normal for underage wizards to make mistakes, and even if they fail, there won't be much punishment. But if Hagrid knew about this and deliberately kept it secret, then if he was discovered, he might be imprisoned in Azkaban again. I understand. Watching the light flash and then disappear before her, Hermione nodded, her face flushed. Guan Qiong calmly let go of her hand. Hagrid cried for a while and then left, and they had to return to Hogwarts Castle for the next class. There was not much time left until the end of the semester. Next was the Easter holiday, then the Quidditch final, and then the exams in June. Every subject was reaching its final stage, and the lessons were no longer new, but rather a review and explanation of old knowledge. Of course, there were also test papers and exams, which made every student feel overwhelmed. On the way to class, Professor Lupin suddenly appeared from the middle, gave Guan Qiong a look, and then left. Guan Qiong nodded. The full moon night of this month was coming again. Chapter 355 The Changes of Werewolves. The Shrieking Shack. It had been almost 3 weeks since Guan Qiong, Hermione, and Ron had last been there. The decor inside hadn't changed much, save for the addition of a werewolf. One that hadn't yet begun its transformation. Guan Qiong, remember, if I lose control, don't hesitate. Escape directly and return to Hogwarts through the secret passage. I'll be fine, Lupin said sternly to Guan Qiong. Guan Qiong nodded. Whether or not she would do so depended on her choice. Meanwhile, a silvery glow began to appear on the dark horizon. A full moon began to rise, its silvery radiance casting a shadow over the land, imbuing its inhabitants with the moon's unique power. Guan Qiong immediately sensed the difference in his surroundings. A sense of coldness and loneliness spread with the moon's appearance, even though the moon shack itself was devoid of moonlight. Had the environment changed? Guan Qiong surveyed his surroundings intently. He had activated his magical vision, but found nothing. Only the peculiar feeling lingered within him. Before him, Professor Lupin, already prepared, had already undergone a subtle change. Reason vanished from his eyes at an alarming rate, and madness began to spread, like red ink dripping into clear water. His pupils instantly turned red, and his muscles tensed, stretching his tattered wizard robes. Guan Qiong watched this scene, but other thoughts were brewing in his mind. Did it require some special attraction to experience this feeling? A contrast? Sensing the loneliness that intensified with Professor Lupin's transformation, Guan Qiong came to a conclusion. He had experienced full moons before, but it seemed only on a few occasions that he could sense the power of moonlight, the enigmas potion, the unicorn's power, and the werewolf's transformation before him. Only on these occasions could he sense that with the falling moonlight, the entire environment shifted, some rare and special power entering this world. However, even if he sensed this power, he could not see its trace, let alone harness it. Perhaps, if astrology magic existed, this power could be harnessed in the astrology class. But astrology magic was even more esoteric than divination magic, and not even the professors at the academy had dabbled in it. Guan Qiong pondered this as, before him, the changes in Lupin's body became more pronounced. Coarse, brownish-black hair began to sprout from his palms, his eyes grew sharp and confused, and his muscles swelled once more, squeezing Lupin's wizard robes into rags that scattered everywhere. No wonder Professor Lupin's clothes looked so tattered, they looked like they'd been torn more than once, patched up with a repairing spell. Guan Qiong thought, focusing his magical gaze on Professor Lupin. As he had anticipated, the transformation of a werewolf bore a striking resemblance to that of an enigmas. Within their bodies, the life circuits began to curl, and a twisted, more powerful magical skeleton supported the entire body, like a transfiguration spell, transforming the human form into a more robust werewolf. Unlike ordinary enigmagy, when a werewolf transforms, its magical skeleton is intertwined with fragments of strange life circuits. Though connected, the two constantly rub against each other like rusted gears, causing the werewolf immense pain. This pain intensifies its bestiality, exacerbating its bloodlust and making it more prone to losing its mind. It seems like a deliberate addition. Bioengineering? Bioengineering from the wizarding world? Guan Qiong wondered. If so, the creator of this must have been a wizard deeply versed in enigmagy and transfiguration. Guan Qiong even thought of the murals she had seen in the cedar tree. What kind of beings were those ancient wizards? Without giving Guan Qiong time to ponder, the fully transformed Professor Lupin roared, turning and looking at her. Guan Qiong saw a deep madness and bestiality in his eyes, but also a glimmer of rationality, restraining him from pouncing. That was the effect of the wolfsbane potion. Combined with the narcissus petals and a series of other ingredients, it suppressed the werewolf's true nature, while allowing the human will to regain control for a moment. But this state of mind was like giving a stimulant to a sleepy patient. While the appearance of improvement was apparent, the underlying problem remained unresolved and only worsened. Guan Qiong frowned. Professor Lupin's bestiality hadn't been significantly diminished, it had merely dormant. As that dormant nature grew, new bestiality was constantly being generated. If this continued, by the time resistance to the wolfsbane potion had developed, the werewolf would likely go completely mad, spreading its bestiality to others. And it seemed a bit ominous. Previously, in the Shrieking Shack, Lupin had transformed on his own, and thanks to the effects of the wolfsbane potion, he could still control himself. But now, besides Lupin, there was Guan Qiong in the Shrieking Shack. Guan Qiong, having mastered the enigmas transformation, possessed a significant amount of bestiality within him. And bestialities tend to attract each other. This time, instead of shrinking, he grew a bit larger, making himself as huge as the werewolf in front of him. Wu facing the equally huge and beastly spirit insect, the werewolf became even more frantic. With a heavy stomp of his powerful hind legs, a shadow flashed by, and the werewolf was in front of Guan Qiong in an instant, slashing directly with its sharp claws. Chapter 356 Recovery. Sharp claws slashed through Guan Qiong's body, passing through it like touching the surface of water. Then, Guan Qiong, who was standing in front of him, disappeared, and tentacles appeared from behind the werewolf, one after another, and began to wrap around its body. "Sorry, Professor, I'm not here to fight, but to heal and collect data," Guan Qiong thought to himself in his worm form behind the werewolf. In worm form, he might use the worm's astral threads to control the opponent, or he might use them to influence them psychologically, just like the memory of young Voldemort used on Ron and Ginny in their second year. While using astral threads to control the werewolf's body was too slow, it was better to wrap the tentacles directly. However, using astral threads to trick the opponent into thinking he was still standing in front of him was a good idea, allowing Guan Qiong to learn faster. Watching the professor struggling before him, Guan Qiong's cat-like face smiled, although it looked a little scary in the dark. Then, countless fragments of light appeared on Guan Qiong's tentacles, which he positioned according to specific directions and attached to the werewolf's body. The divine and animal natures began to dissolve into each other, and the werewolf let out a painful howl. To its animalistic nature, Guan Qiong's condition was like pulling out its teeth. At the same time, from Guan Qiong's magical perspective, the strange fragments of the life circuits within the werewolf's body, stuck in its magical skeleton, became rounder as Guan Qiong moved, further integrating into the entire magical skeleton. Strange, was it the divine nature, or the dissolution of the divine and animal natures? One tentacle twisted into a question mark as Guan Qiong wondered, but more tentacles seized the werewolf, flashing fragments of light again and again, then illuminating its body. Initially, the fragments of light were directly consumed by the beast within the werewolf. However, as more fragments of light appeared, the beast's rate of consumption gradually slowed. Then, as the fragments coalesced into a single, raging fire, the beast began to recede. Guan Qiong also appropriately relaxed his infusion of divine power, maintaining a balance between the two. The werewolf had merged with Lupin, and he could not remove it. He could only, as he had helped Sirius, help him remove some of the beast, allowing him to regain his sanity. Sanity in werewolf form, however, seemed difficult. Guan Qiong observed the fragments of the life circuit within Lupin's body. As he withdrew his divine power, the fragments gradually sharpened with Lupin's vital energy, like polished stone, becoming lodged in the werewolf's magical skeleton, causing problems. Guan Qiong extended his own magic power into them, but the fragments were already connected to the werewolf's magical skeleton. If he forcibly removed them, the entire magical skeleton would collapse. And since the magical skeleton was connected to Lupin's life circuits, a collapse of the magical skeleton could potentially affect Lupin's life. Tisk, trouble. Guan Qiong frowned, finally withdrawing her magic power, along with her divine tentacles. Meanwhile, Lupin, though still in his werewolf form, had already fallen asleep, lying on the dusty floor of the Shrieking Shack, sound asleep. This structure truly resembled a weapon, but what exactly were those guys trying to defeat? Creating a weapon capable of spreading and multiplying? Guan Qiong pondered, gazing at the werewolf on the ground. This clearly involves some ancient secret, but I wonder if any records have survived. However, I'm becoming more proficient. Perhaps I can find Luna, Guan Qiong thought, watching her tentacles dancing with shimmering light. A few days later. Hello, Guan Qiong, what can I do for you? In the Hogwarts corridor, Guan Qiong intercepted Luna, who had just finished class, and led her elsewhere. The other Ravenclaw students avoided Luna and Guan Qiong, as did some students from other houses. Even the wizards found Luna too different, a little hard to accept. "I have something for you." On the way, Guan Qiong's light floated in front of Luna, along with a large amount of candy. The candies flew out of the pockets of Guan Qiong's wizard robes and lined up to land in Luna's pockets, diving into them one by one like diving into water. They were the candies he had bought at Honeydukes when he went out with Hermione and Ron. Luna was only in her second year, and she would have to go to Hogsmeade and buy those candies next year. "Thank you, Guan Qiong, this is great. Although I don't like candy that much, this is really good," Luna said with a twinkling and an indescribable cheerfulness in her tone. "Eating more candy can make you happy, and life won't be so bad." "Is your life terrible, Guan Qiong?" Luna asked, skeptical, looking at Guan Qiong. "Occasionally, but most of the time, it's wonderful," Guan Qiong replied with a smile. "I think so too," Luna said happily. "So, for a better life, we must work harder." Guan Qiong looked at Luna. As she stared at him with confusion, a tentacle reached behind her and touched her neck. Luna fainted, but her body didn't fall. Instead, it levitated, lying flat in midair. Above her, a twisting crack appeared, revealing a figure. The surroundings shifted, as if an unknown dimension had swallowed the place whole. Guan Qiong and Luna were now outside on the lawn, but in that instant, they vanished from the lawn, as if they had never existed. "So, for a better life, we must work harder." Looking at his future self before him, Guan Qiong's body lit up. Simultaneously, his body transformed, taking the form of a spirit worm, his bestiality surging forth, sending a message to the other side. Fight. He had just used his bestiality to subtly lure the other side from the river of time, accelerating the attack significantly. This time, he would take the initiative. Facing Guan Qiong's light, future Guan Qiong showed no reaction. His eyes were filled with madness, and the tentacles below his body twisted madly. Countless tentacles reached out at this moment, entwining, knotting, and twisting. In this strange, non-existent battlefield, with Luna at the center, the two sides engaged in a tentacle-to-tentacle battle. Chapter 357 Failure. Guan Qiong felt an unprecedented pressure. Countless tentacles entwined in the air, pulling at each other, while above them, flame spells, levitation spells, slicing spells, and all sorts of other magic danced. Even luminescent spells, sometimes masquerading as other magic, could deceive him. If he failed to notice any detail, the magic could bypass the tentacles and attack him. While his bestial nature had driven him mad, his use of magic was instinctive, temporarily preventing Guan Qiong from breaking through and even suppressing him. Not to mention, sometimes this future-born being would use high-level spells like all curses can be wrested, spells he hadn't yet mastered, forcing him to rely on his powerful magical powers to counter them. That's right, magic. This was probably his only advantage over the other party. Guan Qiong discovered that, perhaps due to being trapped in the vast river of time, the mana within him, while far more potent than Guan Qiong's, was unrecoverable. In the previous battle, the one before that, the other had already consumed a significant amount of his mana. Now, through his magical perspective, Guan Qiong could see that the mana within him had been significantly reduced. This gave him the ability to engage him. However, it was a real hassle. Guan Qiong instinctively dodged the endless entanglement of tentacles once again, moving swiftly through the space. The mana's tentacle was far stronger and more agile than his own, and some of the magic was unprecedented, requiring him to counter it with magical vibrations and shockwaves. Fortunately, he had a backup plan. In an instant, the tips of Guan Qiong's tentacles emanated a dazzling white light and a scorching heat. He took the flame and luminescence spells to new heights, and the entire space seemed to be plunged into the sun, everything awash in light and heat. Future Guan Qiong placed his tentacles in a perfectly regular pattern, dotting various locations around him. From their tips, ripples emerged, colliding to form a hexagonal edge resembling a honeycomb. Guan Qiong's flames and light vanished as they reached that edge, as if they had never appeared. That was a magical forbidden zone, the embodiment of the all-ending spell, and a formidable presence for Guan Qiong. Fortunately, Guan Qiong hadn't considered using magic to break it. Jermungander, Guan Qiong cried inwardly, a surge of magical power surging outward, pouring into a corner behind him. There, a small snake stretched out its sinuous body, lolling its tongue at the future Guan Qiong overhead. Just as the flame and fluorescent spells illuminated the entire space, Guan Qiong had activated it. This was Guan Qiong's backup plan. As the magic power infused him, Jurmungandr let out a deafening roar. The life circuits within his body began to expand uncontrollably. Flames erupted from his body, solidifying into red and black scales that formed his massive body. The Midgard serpent, Jurmungandr. Under Guan Qiong's control, Jurmungandr suddenly attacked from behind, wrapping his massive body around the future Guan Qiong, his massive head thrusting downward as if to devour him. The barrier of awe spells formed by his tentacles was crushed by Jurmungandr's massive form. They proved ineffective against the life circuits. Countless tentacles stretched outward, attempting to resist Jurmungandr's power, but for the Jurmungandr, transformed from the heart of the stone man. This was undoubtedly impossible. Even Guan Qiong himself could not break free from the force. At this moment, an icy aura emerged, and from behind the future Guan Qiong, another figure emerged, a completely black figure cloaked in black, holding a black scythe. Patronus spell, the embodiment of divinity. In the two previous attacks, he had directly severed all of Guan Qiong's defenses, leaving her unable to fight against her future self and thus devoured. But now, things were different. A tentacle, wrapped around the wand, rose high. As Guan Qiong's magic reached out, fragments of silver light appeared above the wand, quickly coalescing and forming into the shape of a human body. It was Guan Qiong's patron saint, imbued with divinity, appearing in Guan Qiong's form. This time, Guan Qiong also used this divinity to prepare a silver longsword for his avatar. With a wave of Guan Qiong's wand, the patron saint rushed towards the black figure. The divine incarnation collided with the divine incarnation at this moment, and the two, like physical entities, engaged in a mid-air battle. The sword and sickle collided with a cold sound. Silver and black met, like the two sides of Tai Chi, dissipating and reborn. Looking at the trapped black figure, Guan Qiong's cat-headed form breathed a long sigh of relief, feeling a little relieved. Tentacle after tentacle, his future self already suppressed by Jurmungandr. Even the strange black guardian had been entangled by his divine guardian. This time, there shouldn't be any problems. But at that moment, the future Guan Qiong lowered his head, staring at him with mad eyes. Guan Qiong had a bad feeling in his heart. Death, the future Guan Qiong whispered softly, his voice carrying a chill, and his eyes instantly became calm. A calmness that transcended the universe. The black figure's cloak swelled, and blackness began to spread from its body, eroding the surrounding space. At the same time, it raised its scythe, and a sacred, pure, cold, and solemn aura emerged. With each swing of the scythe, everything in front of it was suffused with this dark and cold aura, and it was split in two, including Guan Qiong's divine incarnation. As Guan Qiong stared in disbelief, the future Guan Qiong's eyes changed again, a look of utter madness appearing in them. "I refuse," the future Guan Qiong spoke again. The surrounding tentacles twisted wildly as if on drugs, instantly dispersing anything they touched. A law more overbearing and harsh than the end of all curses appeared within the tentacles of future Guan Qiong, forcefully rejecting everything, including his own tentacles and Jurmungandr. As Guan Qiong stared in disbelief, his tentacles vanished one by one, and Jurmungandr instantly transformed back into the ring containing the stone man's heart, rolling across the ground before landing in front of him. This kind of power. Guan Qiong watched in astonishment as all this unfolded, and he was forced to transform back into his human form. What a pity. Guan Qiong thought, watching the tentacles wrapping around him. As they had done several times before, the tentacles lifted Guan Qiong up and began to pull him back into future Guan Qiong's body, as if he were being devoured. However, it wasn't time to give up yet. Just as he was about to be devoured, Guan Qiong's gaze hardened, and with a flick of his right hand, the nodding sword appeared in his hand. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 358 Heart to Heart. June, you fell asleep again. In the library, Hermione shook Guan Qiong, who was lying on the table beside her, and said with concern. Guan Qiong rubbed his eyes and looked around with some confusion. After a long time, he seemed to regain his memory. He was devoured again. "What's wrong, Qiong? You don't look well," Hermione asked with concern. There were many books in front of them. It seemed that they had just come to the library to look up some information. Yet, Guan Qiong nodded, thought for a moment, and told her what had happened, especially the fact that he was devoured again. He had already told Hermione about his future self. Hermione said she would help find some information to see if there was a solution. They were looking for information in the library, but Guan Qiong unexpectedly fell asleep. Is your future self very powerful? Can you ask Professor Dumbledore for help? Hermione asked. It's powerful. No one else would be able to help. During our battle, he and I would enter a unique dimension, where only he, Luna, and I existed, Guan Qiong recalled. His original plan was to use his magical advantage and Jormungander's suppression of wizards to control the enemy. Then, using the same method he used against Peter Pettigrew, Sirius Black, and Professor Lupin, he would use his divine power to dissipate some of the enemy's bestiality, restoring his sanity. However, he hadn't anticipated the sudden burst of power just as he was about to capture him. In a split second, it destroyed all his methods and devoured him. Although he struggled at the end, it was ineffective, only allowing him to see something unexpected. I don't quite understand all this divine and bestial nature you're talking about, but you mentioned that your future self spent a long time alone in time and was very lonely. So, I think this might be able to help you. Hermione rubbed her eyes and pushed the book in front of Guan Qiong. It was a book about a mind, explaining how people can open their hearts and unite with them, thereby freeing the world from lies. They had recently searched numerous books on time, but had found no effective methods. So Hermione considered a different approach. Instead of focusing on time, she sought a direct influence on the other party, the Guan Qiong from the future, to resolve this situation. You once said that your future self had fallen into a state of madness. Here, there's a mysterious elixir from the East that can connect your soul with another's, merging them into one, allowing you to sense each other. Perhaps this can restore him to sanity, Hermione said, pointing to the contents of the thick book before her. Guan Qiong stared in surprise at the elixir described in the book before her, the elixir called the heart-linking pill. This was a mysterious product from the East. Legend has it that ancient sorcerers there, sensing the unusual spiritual connection between twins, invented the elixir. By administering this elixir to two distant beings, the sorcerers achieved long-distance information transmission, thus enabling the ancient nation to control its vast territory. Truly magical. Guan Qiong examined the book before her. It stated that, in addition to transmitting information, ancient sorcerers also used this elixir to cultivate connections with strange beasts, magical creatures, allowing them to protect their sex. However, as the connection between humans and beasts deepened, an unknown contamination spread among the people, gradually driving them mad and losing their minds. Coupled with the turmoil in the country, this elixir was eventually banned. It wasn't until modern times that it was rediscovered and recorded. Maybe it really does work, Hermione. Thank you so much, Guan Qiong said happily. It's nothing. It's an ancient Eastern elixir. I'm also interested in it. And the recipe is recorded here. It's not entirely complete, but I think I can try it out, Hermione smiled, also cheering up. She had always had a talent for potions, but because of Harry and Ron, and her own Muggle family, Snape didn't like her. Will you help me refine it? Hermione, I can do it myself. Light appeared in front of Guan Qiong, forming a sentence, and then floated in front of Hermione. You have to let me feel involved, otherwise I'll feel like I can't help you at all. Hermione looked at Guan Qiong with a firm gaze. You've already helped me a lot, Guan Qiong wanted to say, but seeing Hermione's gaze, she changed the words in the light before her. Then I'll trouble you, don't worry, it will be quick. I'm not trapped by time. I will definitely refine it for you before the end of the semester. This ancient elixir from the mysterious East is so interesting, Hermione said with curiosity and confidence. Guan Qiong understood Hermione's meaning. Because he was devoured by his future self, if he used the time turner now, the extra time would disappear. Therefore, to prevent his own time from being lost and to prevent his future self from devouring too much time, he no longer used the time turner to increase his number of clones in the same time period to do more things. This forced him to compromise on some electives and other matters. Fortunately, the end of the semester wasn't far away, so Guan Qiong could tolerate the temporary annoyance. Hermione, however, didn't have this problem. While she was reading with Guan Qiong, she might have already set up her crucible somewhere else and begun refining the elixir. However, He wondered if this Western crucible could produce Eastern elixirs, or if he needed to buy an alchemy furnace. Time passed, and Easter vacation came and went. Many students didn't even notice it coming, because the professors assigned so much homework that they only felt like they had just finished their homework and looked up again when it was time for class. Guan Qiong also felt a slight sense of difficulty. Without the time turner, he had to leave a lot of time to complete homework for multiple subjects. As for Hermione, she had long since disappeared, probably busy with a Liangsan pill. When they occasionally saw her, she would mutter something about slow fire and high fire, leaving Harry and Ron confused. But Harry and Ron didn't have much time to care about these things, because on the first Saturday after the Easter holidays, the Quidditch final began. Chapter 359 Before the Quidditch final. So, you need to win by more than 200 points to win. This means Harry can't catch the snitch too early. At the Gryffindor table that morning, a dot of light appeared in front of Harry and Ron. It was mainly in front of Ron. The dot in front of Harry only appeared for a moment before fading. Yes, because Slytherin is leading the league by 200 points, we have to be 200 points ahead of them to win. This means Harry has to catch the snitch when we're 50 points ahead of them, no sooner, Ron explained. I don't understand the league rules, but I understand this, Guan Qiong nodded. He wasn't particularly interested in Quidditch, and his understanding of the rules was superficial. He was a casual observer. However, today he decided to go to the Quidditch final with Hermione, Ron, and the others. Luna would also be there. She was actually more interested in Quidditch than Guan Qiong. This was a good thing. Being in a group diminished loneliness, and thus, lessened one's animalistic nature. While Hermione and the others didn't have this problem, Gwen and Luna did, especially Luna. Gwen could sense that her loneliness was affecting her future self. Yes, it's actually quite simple. There's no simpler and more fun sport than Quidditch. You just dodge some balls, throw some into the opposing hoop, then defend against incoming balls, and finally, catch the shiniest, fastest ball. Pretty simple, isn't it? Ron explained excitedly to Gwen. He felt an obligation to explain Quidditch to everyone who didn't know about it but was interested. If possible, he wanted to make wizards and witches everywhere, and even muggles everywhere, understand and love it. I heard muggles have brooms, motorcycles, that can be ridden on the ground and are incredibly fast. Why don't they have a ground-based Quidditch game? Ron pondered. Breakfast passed quickly, and the students formed into several streams of varying colors, heading for the Quidditch pitch. It was clear that the Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs disliked Slytherins. Instead of moving towards them, they crowded around Gryffindor, forming a tricolor banner. Harry followed Wood, the Gryffindor captain, out of the Great Hall first, as they needed to get acquainted with the pitch. Before leaving, Cho Chang, the Ravenclaw seeker from the mysterious East, shouted encouragement to Harry. Good luck, Harry. Harry blushed, and at least 30 people saw it. Hermione, Ron, and Gwen walked together, and soon Luna joined them from the other side, clutching a red banner with a Gryffindor lion and a bright red rose on her front, a symbol of her support for Gryffindor. Gwen, Hermione, hello everyone. It's so popular today, Luna said happily, waving her flag and blending in with the crowd. Yeah, it's very popular, Hermione nodded, revealing a banner she carried that read Go Gryffindor. A moment later, they arrived at the Quidditch pitch. The field was now divided into two colors. Gryffindor's side was a vibrant red, while behind the Slytherin goalposts were their distinctive green ornaments. Silver snakes adorned their banners, gleaming, yet also somewhat unsettling. This discomfort was partly due to Professor Snape, who sat in the first row of Slytherin. A dark smile played on his face, as if he were about to whip out his wand and hex the other houses. Of course, it could also be that he was looking for an excuse to deduct points from the other houses, something Ron had always suspected Snape would do. Guan Qiong, Hermione, and the others found a good seat. Guan Qiong cast a levitation charm on the banner, sprinkling it with light, making the lettering shimmer. Nearby, Luna seemed inspired, waving her wand, giving the Gryffindor lion on the banner a glowing outline. However, her control wasn't as good as Guan Qiong's. The outline was too simple, resembling a giant cat. Now, everyone, look over here. The much-anticipated Gryffindor team is about to take the field, a lively voice echoed from the field. The commentator, as usual, was Lee Jordan, Fred and George's passionate friend. Potter, Bell, Johnson, Spinnet, the Weasley brothers, and Wood, They're generally considered the best Hogwarts team in years, Lee Jordan declared. His words drew loud cheers from most of the audience, but from the Slytherin crowd, there were boos. They considered the Slytherin team the strongest. Lee ignored them and moved on to introduce the next team. Next up, Slytherin. My goodness. Their green uniforms blend in with the grass, making them hard to spot. But I managed to find Captain Flint. He's the tallest, and looks like a sturdy blade of grass, Lee said. The boos from the Slytherin crowd intensified. Has he really never been beaten? Such an obvious bias. Guan Qiong looked at Ron beside him curiously, as the light dot floated in front of him. In the noisy environment of the stadium, the light dot actually became a more accessible method of communication. After all, if the opponent didn't reply, it could remain in front of the other person, making them unable to see anything. Who said there wasn't? The Slytherins tried to curse him several times, but Fred and George weren't pushovers. They used those prank props to fight back, and with Percy and Professor McGonagall around, they had no way to stop them, Ron replied loudly with a laugh. He had probably seen the Slytherins get humiliated. Okay. Guan Qiong looked back at the game. The captains of the two teams ahead had already finished shaking hands. It was clear that they didn't consider this a sign of friendship and wanted to break each other's hands. Fortunately, both were strong athletes, so neither could do anything to the other. With a whistle from referee Madam Hooch, both teams took off simultaneously. 14 brooms shot up into the sky, instantly streaking across the Quidditch pitch like 14 shooting stars. They were indeed shooting stars. To those with limited eyesight, the field looked like red and green shooting stars constantly speeding, then colliding, then separating and speeding again. Occasionally, if the ball passed between them, they would all fly towards the ball. Chapter 360, Fierce Finals. Honestly, if it weren't for the occasional goal, with several balls literally flying between them, Guan Qiong would have thought they were actually engaging in a wizard duel. After all, on the field, attacks on people were far more frequent than on the field, and referee Madam Hooch was stern in her penalties. For a while, the two teams were locked in a penalty shootout. However, Gryffindor's keeper, Wood, also the captain of the Gryffindor team, was stronger than Slytherin, giving them a significant advantage in penalty kicks. Currently, they were 20 points ahead. On the Quidditch field, Harry was following his usual tactics, rapidly ascending to the top of the table, relying on his keen observation to search for the golden snitch lurking on the field. Once located, he would sprint forward with his firebolt, striking first at the snitch. Even if someone blocked his path or the snitch veered off, his mastery of his broomstick would allow him to quickly close in on the snitch until he caught it. Just as Harry was searching for the snitch, another whistle blew. Slytherin chaser Montague, while trying to grab the quaffle, grabbed Gryffindor's Katie's head, causing the quaffle to escape. This was a serious foul, and Montague was reprimanded by Madam Hooch. Gryffindor was awarded a free throw. It was their third free throw, and they scored again, bringing the score to 30-0. 30-0, this is a lesson for those Slytherins that their dirty, shameless tactics won't work, commentator Lee Jordan exclaimed, showing a clear bias, though admittedly, there was some truth to his words. Of course, he was immediately reprimanded by Professor McGonagall, who, at least on the surface, had to be fair. Harry quickly lost himself from the game below, keeping a close eye on the score while searching for the snitch. He couldn't make a move until the score was over 50. Even if he saw the snitch, he had to make sure the Slytherins didn't catch it. But he seemed to see it. There, Guan Qiong pointed out to those in the audience. His magical vision allowed him to see things more purely and fundamentally, and the enchantment attached to the snitch made its magic circuits different from those of other flying balls. Therefore, even at its fastest speed, Guan Qiong spotted it immediately. It was hidden beneath one of the Gryffindor goalposts, looking like a cat that had strayed onto the field to watch the game. Oh, that's right, Qiong. Put your hands down. We can't reveal this information. The score gap hasn't widened yet, and we can't let the Slytherins discover the snitch. Ron, standing by, quickly stopped Guan Qiong's hand and explained quietly. Guan Qiong readily lowered his hand. To be honest, he still didn't quite understand the rules of this league, whether it was a total point system or something, but since Ron said so, he decided to listen. After all, the game was quite interesting to watch. Although it looked a bit like a wizard fighting in formation, fighting was still very interesting, especially when it involved multiple balls. Harry, at the top of the group, also spotted the snitch, probably only a little later than Guan Qiong. His observation was incredibly sharp, but he didn't move. Instead, he looked at Malfoy. Perhaps by some kind of telepathic connection, Malfoy immediately glanced at him, a mocking expression on his pale face. Harry suddenly turned his firebolt and rushed to the other side of the field, as if he had spotted the snitch. In reality, he was heading in the exact opposite direction of the snitch. And just as he'd expected, Malfoy followed without a second thought, even though he saw nothing there. Whatever it was, the only thing to do was stop Potter. That was Malfoy's only thought. Harry's moving. Wait, why is he going that way? Is he seeing things? Hermione asked in confusion from the audience. They're probably trying to distract Malfoy, preventing him from finding the snitch, and also disrupting the Slytherin team's rhythm. Look, they tried to attack Harry, but Harry was too fast, and those two idiots collided, which was a real setback, Ron explained quickly, his eyes fixed on the changes on the field. Guan Qiong thought it was great to have Ron on hand to commentate, much better than Lee Jordan, and able to answer their questions in real time. Just like before, Guan Qiong guessed the first point, but missed the second. It was probably some kind of tactical coordination. Guan Qiong saw that after Harry rushed down and caught nothing, the other Gryffindor players ignored Harry and the Slytherin team members who were distracted by Harry, and instead threw themselves into the quaffle, the ball that could score, which allowed them to widen the gap. The score was 40-0. However, Slytherin Captain Flint was no one to be trifled with. Seeing no golden figure in front of Harry, he dismissed those harassing Harry, sending only Malfoy, the Seeker, to keep an eye on Harry while the others returned to their normal game. With his towering presence and impressive play, he snatched a quaffle and slotted it into the Gryffindor goal. Even with Wood defending, he managed to score, bringing the score to 40-10. From there, the field began to unravel, a shift that even a layman like Guan Qiong could sense. The strikers began to attack other players recklessly, regardless of whether it was a foul or not, leading to an increase in the opponent's penalty kicks. However, the attacks on Gryffindor's players weakened their formation, allowing Slytherin to find opportunities and score twice, bringing the score to 70-30. The gap between the two teams continued to widen, but if it didn't quickly close to over 50 points, Harry wouldn't be able to truly strike and find the snitch to win the game, and Malfoy would eventually discover the snitch. They're in a stalemate, Guan Qiong expressed, a sentiment echoed by the others. Yes, they're in a stalemate. They need a chance to break the deadlock, Ron said nervously, gazing at everyone on the field. Guan Qiong even suspected his eyes had evolved into the compound eyes of insects, for he could detect every foul and shout out curses. Especially those on the Slytherin side. Chapter 361 The End of the Game. Harry felt like his eyes were about to burst. He kept a close eye on the snitch, trying not to let it escape his sight and disappear into the distance. He also watched the Gryffindor and Slytherin teams below, watching for any chance of them scoring. If Gryffindor could pull ahead of Slytherin by more than 50 points, he could truly strike, capture the snitch, and end the match. But that wasn't happening yet. The scoreline remained at 40, and the two teams were locked in a stalemate. But that stalemate was immediately broken. The quaffle isn't in the scoring area, it can't hit the keeper, Madam Hooch screamed angrily at Ball and Derek. Just then, the two of them had used their bludgers to hit the Gryffindor keeper and captain in the stomach, nearly knocking him off his broom. And all this was because Wood had blocked most of the Slytherin shots, denying Slytherin any chance of scoring. Gryffindor free throw, Madam Hooch shouted, and Harry glanced nervously. Goal. The situation on the field shifted rapidly. Harry had barely turned his eyes when Angelina scored 10 points, bringing the score to 80-30. Then, before the Slytherin players could react, Fred used a bludger to knock the quaffle out of their hands and passed it to Alicia. Another goal. 90-30, over 60 now, time to act. Harry didn't even have time to look back before his body had already completed its intended movement. The firebolt flew with a frantic gust of wind, hurtling towards the golden snitch Harry had just spotted. The wind, at its speed, seemed to take on a physical form, repeatedly battering Harry's face, distorting it. The cheers on the field seemed to cease, and everyone stared nervously at Harry and his direction. Following Harry's movements, everyone saw a flash of gold. Golden snitch. Harry, catch it, Ron shouted nervously. Hermione and Luna also stood nervously, watching Harry in midair. As for Guan Qiong, His heart was also affected by the surroundings, a wave of excitement building within him, but he remained calm and focused his magical vision on the snitch. The moment Harry rushed over, something seemed to have triggered, and Guan Qiong saw the magical circuits within the snitch shift and change. Whoosh! In a split second, the snitch vanished from everyone's sight, as if it had never appeared. Guan Qiong immediately shifted his gaze elsewhere, and Harry, not much faster, swung his broom and flew in that direction. Harry could feel hundreds of eyes fixed on him as he circled the field, closely following the snitch. While the Gryffindor and Slytherin teams were also vying for the ball, most of their attention was on him. And of course, there was also Malfoy, who was following behind him. "Malfoy, hurry up," the Slytherin players shouted, but Malfoy responded with a fierce look. He wanted to hurry, but that jerk was a firebolt. Still, he kept a respectful distance, trailing Harry, searching for an opportunity to pass him around the bend. Closer, closer. Harry stared at the snitch ahead, his mind devoid of all thought. All forms lost their meaning to him, only the constant shifting of speed and direction allowed him to maneuver his broom with mechanical precision, following the glittering, tumbling snitch. As he pursued, he was only 20 feet away. But the next second, the snitch did a sharp 90-degree turn, flying the other way, forcing Harry to follow in a crescent-shaped arc. This arc allowed Malfoy, behind him, to close the gap, so much so that he could have reached out and grabbed his broom. Fortunately, Malfoy didn't do that, or the firebolt's immense speed would have surely pulled him down. The two chased each other almost in tandem, Malfoy attempting to use his body to block Harry's turns and gain an advantage. However, Harry's speed, combined with his meticulous and deft control of his broom, thwarted Malfoy's plan. Finally, they both plummeted from the sky, soaring towards the snitch, which lay almost level with the lawn. This was the final moment. Whoever could catch the snitch would win the Quidditch Cup. Harry led the way, but Malfoy remained at his side, constantly harassing him. Like natural rivals, they maintained a pace, flying in unison. However, at this final moment, something separated them. To maintain their pursuit of the snitch, Harry soared almost parallel to the ground, feeling the grass scrape against his robes, and the stinging grass dust smacked his face. But Malfoy didn't dare take such a risky maneuver, one that could easily tip over. He had to stay slightly above Harry to avoid a careless tilt that would send him careening to the ground. This also slowed him down slightly compared to Harry. Faster. 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 Harry's eyes were now empty. Even speed and direction had lost their meaning. All he could see was the golden light before him, the light that could bring everything. Finally, he reached out toward it. He released his grip on the broomstick and, nearly level with the ground, lunged forward. Behind him, Malfoy, with one hand outstretched, was a step slower, nearly losing his balance and having to quickly pull himself up and away from the area. "Got it!" In the audience, Ron exclaimed excitedly at the golden snitch raised in Harry's hand. The entire audience erupted in cheers, everyone jumping for joy and cheering wildly. Guan Qiong responded by throwing a few points of light into the sky. They flew high into the sky and exploded, turning into dazzling fireworks to celebrate the victory. Everyone was happy, except for Slytherin College. Professor Snape looked at Harry on the field with a grim expression, then snorted heavily, tossed his cloak, and left with a grim expression. Chapter 362 Final Exam. The joy of winning the Quidditch Cup lingered for over a week at Hogwarts. Every wizard smiled as they met, as if the barriers between the houses had dissolved. Of course, that was with the exception of the Slytherins, whose faces grew even gloomier, as if they had just been dug out of a grave. But no one paid them any attention. It was precisely this expression of theirs that made the other three houses so happy. As June approached, the weather began to clear and cloudless, and the scorching heat washed over them, filling everyone with a restless urge to do something. But something weighed on them, preventing them from doing anything. It was the final exams. As the exams approached, the entire school fell into a state of calm and repression during this sweltering season. The common room and library became the two places students spent most of their time, and absolute silence was mandatory, lest they be watched with 100 eyes. "Joan, another drink, another drink. I can't take it anymore," Ron whispered to Joan in the Gryffindor common room, his eyes fixed nervously on the surroundings. Fortunately, no one noticed. Guan Qiong, her head buried in her book, remained still. With a gentle wave of her right hand, a spring of water and a freezing spell simultaneously flowed, filling Ron's right-hand cup with a full, steaming glass of ice water. Guan Qiong hadn't forgotten Hermione and Harry either. 2 glasses of ice water also appeared in their cups, bringing a comforting coolness. Hermione looked up and glared at Ron, but with a look of joy, she took the full, cool cup and drank it in one gulp. A cool sensation emanated from within, dissipating much of the irritation within her. Although she knew both spells, only Guan Qiong could perform them silently, without a wand, and without causing any disturbance. If she had done it, not only would the spells be heard by those in the common room, but the ice water wouldn't have appeared so quietly, clinking loudly in the cups. Ron happily took a sip, keeping his mouth shut to prevent a sound of joy. All around him, every student was diligently studying for their exams, including the mischievous brothers Fred and George. They were in their 5th year and would be taking their ALs, the ordinary wizarding levels. Percy, in his 7th year, would be taking his NEWTs, the final wizarding tests. Percy, however, had always been a worry-free individual. His academic record was excellent, and he was simply experiencing the usual pre-exam jitters. Though this nervousness had made him a bit jumpy, Guan Qiong was also studying intensely. Entering his 3rd year, the material had become far more challenging, especially since he'd taken all the courses and recently couldn't use the time turner to create multiple copies of himself to study. This had suddenly intensified his studies. Fortunately, he'd not slacked off in his studies, maintaining a solid grasp of the material. Therefore, reviewing wasn't about rebuilding from scratch, it was simply about identifying any gaps. However, there was a slight problem during the exams, as several exams had conflicting dates. Looks like I have to hand in the paper early. Guan Qiong scratched his head, feeling somewhat helpless. Fortunately, it was all almost over. Guan Qiong rubbed his eyes. Black lines flashed across his arm, and his fingers softened slightly, like ropes, but they soon disappeared. He could feel the final moment, the moment of choice, approaching. The day of the final battle with his future self, the day after the final exam, would be the day when his future self would finally make his final break with him. Whether he would be devoured or resolve his troubles, that day would determine his fate. Qiong, the stuff is ready. Hermione checked the time and suddenly whispered in Guan Qiong's ear. Curiosity flashed in Guan Qiong's eyes, and he nodded. He stood up with Hermione and left the Gryffindor common room. Ron and Harry watched Guan Qiong and Hermione leave, then glanced at the piles of memorization in front of them. They muttered something, then reluctantly lowered their heads and continued to review. Following Hermione all the way to the 8th floor of Hogwarts, they arrived in front of the room of requirement. Ever since Guan Qiong had told Hermione about this place, they had moved some activities there to avoid being seen by others. For example, Guan Qiong practiced magic. Another example was Hermione brewed potions. And Hermione had called Guan Qiong here today because she had finally prepared the heart-linking pill. As Hermione walked past a wall, a portal of light appeared before them. Guan Qiong followed Hermione inside, and they found themselves in a dimly lit room, about the size of a classroom, much of it shrouded in darkness, making it difficult to see clearly. This elixir from the east requires dim light to be refined, and many of its ingredients need to be better preserved in a dark environment, Hermione explained, noticing the puzzlement on Guan Qiong's face. Then, she led Guan Qiong to the table in the center, where a crucible sat covered with a lid. The lid was constantly pulsing, as if something was about to come out. How did you make the elixir with a crucible? Guan Qiong looked at the crucible with curiosity. He had previously asked Hermione if she wanted to build a furnace or something else to brew this obviously different potion from Western potions, but Hermione refused, saying she had a solution. It's actually not difficult. All it takes is a constantly rotating spell, and then adding some inducing materials to the center, and the potion will condense on its own. Honestly, I think this technique can be used for a wide range of potions, Hermione said confidently. Guan Qiong remained non-committal. Potions were a familiar format in the Western wizarding world, and if they were suddenly switched to pills, many people would probably not be able to consume them. Furthermore, the potency would likely be somewhat compromised, though it would likely allow for a longer shelf life. Hermione walked over to the pulsating crucible, took out her wand, and gently tapped it. The lid instantly popped off, and 2 glowing red pills flew out, hovering between Hermione and Guan Qiong. The heart-linking pills are a pair of pills. After taking them, you can sense the heart of the person who took them. Of course, if you've learned occlumency, this effect won't work on you, Hermione explained to Guan Qiong. How long does the effect last? If I take it now, will the effect show up immediately in my future self? If I feed it to him then, won't both pills be in my system? Guan Qiong asked with a light point. But then again, he did have two hearts. Chapter 363 The Final Battle. The final exams went very smoothly, at least according to Guan Qiong. In Transfiguration, he not only transformed a teapot into a complete turtle, but also manipulated a group of turtles of varying sizes to stack up into a tower, fully demonstrating his transfiguration and mass manipulation skills. Then came the Charms exam, which involved the Happy Charm and a few other spells, but was certainly no problem for Guan Qiong. Because of Hagrid's preoccupation, the Care of Magical Creatures exam was the easiest. They simply had to watch the flabberworms and wait for an hour. If left alone, they would survive just fine, and the test required them to still be alive after an hour. The same was true for the other exams. Aside from Guan Qiong's lack of smoothness in his flying class, he performed flawlessly in all the others. Even Professor Snape, the most demanding of Gryffindors, gave him a perfect score in potions. After all, the intoxicating potion he had concocted was perfectly colorless and odorless, like a glass of pure water. Finally, it was Professor Trelawney's divination class. Guan Qiong had no problems, but Harry, who was kept by Professor Trelawney, had a prophecy about the Dark Lord's return. Before Harry could discuss this with the others, another piece of bad news arrived. Buckbeak was to be executed at sunset. We must go. We can't leave Hagrid alone, Harry said, his eyes determined. Hermione and Ron shared the same thought, but Guan Qiong's gaze shifted slightly, looking in the other direction of Hogwarts Castle. Sorry, I might be absent. I have something very important to attend to. Guan Qiong gave Hermione and the others an apologetic look. Harry and Ron didn't understand, but Hermione did. Zhuang, but what about Buckbeak? Ron said anxiously. I know, but I believe you can save him. You can save more people tonight. If I'm in time, I'll come to help you. Guan Qiong's face was apologetic, but her eyes were determined. I understand, June. You must return safely. Hermione looked at Guan Jun and nodded, leaving Harry and Ron with a puzzled look. Guan Jun watched the three depart, sighed softly, and, perking himself up, headed towards the Black Lake. He could sense Luna's presence there, and at the same time, his future self was approaching. He had devoured enough time and was about to make changes to the real world, altering certain already determined future events. Passing wizards excitedly discussing their holiday lives, Guan Jun arrived at the Black Lake. The giant squid that usually basked there had dived to the bottom, seemingly sensing something. Luna sat alone by the lake, gazing at the tranquil surface, her golden hair cascading down, like the colors of the setting sun adorning the world. Guan Jun, Luna smiled as she saw Guan Jun approaching. In her hand, she held the candy Guan Jun had better, and she was also chewing one. It's very sweet, different from the one sold on the train, Luna said with a smile. It's very sweet. Guan Jun frowned at Luna. He could sense the beastly frenzy around him, the oppression of time so intense that even the real world was slightly affected. Yet, his future self hadn't appeared, as if blocked by something. What did you do, Luna? Guan Qiong sat down beside her and asked with a light. Luna didn't answer. She gazed at the golden light reflected on the water, a surprisingly calm expression on her face. Watch the sunset with me, Guan Qiong, she said. Guan Qiong's frown deepened. Sitting there felt like sitting on a volcano poised to erupt at any moment, his entire body tensed. But the expected battle didn't materialize. The beastliness and madness around him, though growing, were suppressed in another dimension, unable to disturb him. He looked at Luna, unsure of what she intended. And then, Luna spoke, a look of reminiscence on her face. Guan Qiong, are we friends? Yes, we are, Guan Qiong nodded, affirming. So when did we become friends? Luna turned, her golden eyes reflecting a brilliant golden glow, brighter than the setting sun. Last year, on the train, Guan Qiong replied. No, Luna shook her head. I feel like we've been friends for a very, very long time. Luna's eyes were filled with reminiscence. After my mother died in a magical experiment, you appeared and became my friend, a friend only I could see. Guan Qiong was silent. But, for some reason, after I came to Hogwarts, I forgot all about it, Guan Qiong. I forgot about you. I don't know why, Luna whispered. But lately, I've been slowly remembering it. I remember a lot of things. You fighting with your other self, it was like a dream, You being eaten by your other self, more and more. So, Guan Qiong looked at Luna. I can't let you get hurt, Guan Qiong. You're my only friend. Luna smiled, not her usual strange, aloof smile, but a calm smile, as gentle as a lake. Cracks appeared in her golden pupils as she smiled. Like a shattered mirror. Then, her entire body suddenly became ethereal, as if vanishing from this world. Silly girl, Guan Qiong gave a wry smile, her eyes suddenly determined. Simultaneously, her body rapidly transformed, her limbs melted and vanished, tentacles sprouted, and her head transformed into the shape of a cat. Enigmas, the insect form of the spirit. Simultaneously, a surge of animality emanated from Guan Qiong, like a signal, calling upon another animality to arrive, an invitation to battle. The golden sunset vanished, and the entire space was devoured, as if by a cat. The two people by the lake vanished, and Guan Qiong and Luna appeared in a space bordering reality. Luna's eyes closed unwillingly. Guan Qiong, finally, she strained to open her eyes wide, reaching out her hand and calling. One of Guan Qiong's tentacle grasped her hand, and the cat head smiled gently, the same expression she had when Luna had teased him with a cat teaser. It'll be alright. A point of light condensed in front of Luna, then reorganized into a silver sword. Simultaneously, a silver figure crawled out from behind Guan Qiong and grabbed the silver sword. It was another Guan Qiong, the embodiment of divinity. On the other side, space ripped open, revealing a Guan Qiong with a human upper body and twisting tentacles at the lower. Chapter 364 End. Gently releasing Luna's hand, Guan Qiong turned his attention to his future self. Seeing his frantic eyes, he sighed. If he was right, those memories of Luna's past must have been created by his future self. It was just that, for some reason, after attending school, Luna's memories had vanished, or perhaps been sealed. And his future self no longer appeared before Luna, wandering alone through the river of time, becoming lonely and mad. Regardless, this was the final moment, no time to dwell on such matters. Gazing at the madly powerful future self before him, Guan Qiong's tentacles spread out and he pulled out a potion. Future Potion 2.0. Guan Qiong drank it in one gulp. Magical power surged wildly within him, and his body continuously transformed. Finally, like his future self, his upper body transformed back into human form, leaving only the tentacles below, twitching wildly and vigorously. Guan Qiong looked at herself, puzzled. But this was not the time to dwell on such thoughts. Feeling the seemingly boundless, terrifying power within her, she raised her head and gazed at herself before her. Countless tentacles extended, instantly filling half the space. Future Guan Qiong's tentacles surged wildly, occupying the other half. Then, they began to intertwine and entwine with Guan Qiong's own tentacles. Suddenly, the entire space transformed into a snake's nest, a mass of writhing black, long, twisting forms. Meanwhile, the divine incarnation behind Guan Qiong, fueled by powerful magical energy, grew ever more solid, finally transforming into a physical entity. Raising its longsword, it slashed at the future Guan Qiong. A black figure emerged from behind the future Guan Qiong, wielding a black scythe, and struck at the divine incarnation. The two engaged in a mid-air battle. Passing tentacles, upon contact, clashed fiercely, like water meeting fire, before vanishing. At the same time, countless magic spells erupted, and fireballs pelted the enemy like meteorites, endlessly crashing down upon them. Jurmungandr was also awakened by Guan Qiong. Fueled by powerful magic, it soared in a blink of an eye to the height of dozens of stories and bit down hard on the future Guan Qiong. In an instant, the entire situation was under Guan Qiong's control. This was perfectly normal. After all, he had consumed the potion of the future, and the difference between him and the future Guan Qiong lay only in his mastery of magic. Their power was nearly equal. However, at this moment, the future Guan Qiong's eyes grew wild. He looked down at Guan Qiong, his mouth opened, and a few words uttered like an oracle. I refuse. As the future Guan Qiong opened his mouth, an icy law began to spread from his surroundings. All tentacles around him vanished, transforming into the most basic matter. Even space seemed to collapse, a piece vanishing, plunging into pure black before slowly repairing itself. Guan Qiong watched the scene, gritting his teeth as he controlled Jurmungandr, manipulating its tail with its mouth, forming a circle. He simultaneously infused more magic power into it, transforming Jurmungandr's life circuits. Restart the world serpent, Guan Qiong muttered to himself. His tentacles extended, grasping the massive Jormungandr, lifting it like a shield. He then extended his reach toward Guan Qiong's all-annihilating realm. Simultaneously, his body leaned forward, closing the distance between them. As he entered that realm, Jormungandr's body began to dissipate. At the same time, another surge of magic power rushed in, cooperating with Jormungandr's life circuits, which formed a continuous circle, to repair his body. In this constant struggle between the forces of dissipation and repair, Jormungandr's scales continuously fell, transforming into primal flames and vanishing, but more scales continuously sprouted, maintaining its form. Within the circle formed by Jormungandr, Guan Qiong remained intact and drew closer to his future self. Seeing his tactics were ineffective, the future Guan Qiong's expression shifted again, this time calm. A chilling, cosmic loneliness emanated from him, and the black figure with his scythe returned behind him. Death, the future Guan Qiong cried out. The black figure wielded the scythe, a sacred, icy aura emanating from it. Everything before him was split in two, including space itself. Faced with this situation, Guan Qiong gritted his teeth and brought his divine avatar before him. Several spiritual threads extended from his tentacles, manipulating the divine avatar in a different form. Simultaneously, he manipulated the divine avatar's transformation. A cloak appeared, draped over it, obscuring everything. Guan Qiong pondered that familiar, icy aura, a breath he had once shared a glance with, and he endeavored to channel that aura into the divine avatar in the form of emotion. From nowhere, a force emerged, flowing into the divine avatar before Guan Qiong, causing it to transform. A cold, lonely aura emerged from the divine incarnation, its chill spreading all around, threatening to freeze everything. Suddenly, before Guan Qiong, a Dementor appeared. Future Guan Qiong's icy blade, piercing the Dementor, sliced through it, but like water entering a river, it was swallowed up without a trace, vanishing into thin air. It worked. Guan Qiong's eyes lit up, and he channeled his magic even more forcefully, controlling Jormungandr and the divine incarnation as shields, advancing towards his future self. After these two ineffective moves, future Guan Qiong became even more frantic, unleashing a frenzy of spells. He was astonished at the vast array of magic his future self possessed, some of which seemed beyond the reach of human wizards. However, he was now in a state of irrationality, fighting on instinct, and Guan Qiong's current magical power was astonishing. Therefore, while these spells caused him some minor trouble, they were not a major problem. Finally, he reached his future self, only half a meter between them. Here, animality and divinity collided and dissipated, yet a calm, like the eye of a storm, remained. The tentacles outside also maintained a state of equilibrium, unable to interfere with or attack the other. Jormungandr and the divine incarnation continued to entangle the future Guan Qiong's tentacles, dispelling the power and death force. Guan Qiong, however, faced himself. Facing his future self, he took out the heart-linking pill Hermione had prepared for him. Come, let me see what happened to my future self. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 365 Choice. Facing his now mature self, Guan Qiong swung his right hand, and the Norton sword appeared in his hand. He then aimed directly at his future self, slicing through her abdomen. The sharp blade slashed open her stomach as Guan Qiong exerted his strength, but no blood flowed. Meanwhile, Guan Qiong's face remained expressionless, as if she felt no pain. However, the surrounding tentacles moved even more frantically, like seaweed stirred by a storm on the ocean floor, twisting and tangling around Guan Qiong, attempting to drag him away. But Guan Qiong's own tentacles followed suit, entwining with each other, neither able to resist. Irresistible magic emanated and vanished from the tentacles, clashing hundreds of times every second until the entire space was filled with magic, like the surface of a stormy sea. Despite this, Guan Qiong's grip grew steadier, slicing open her stomach, revealing the true form within. There were no bloody organs or any tissues or organs, only a chaotic, tranquil, sleep-like mist, not unlike the ghosts of Hogwarts Castle. There lay the true form of future Guan Qiong, his essential existence in the river of time. During his last devourment, Guan Qiong's final Norton sword attack had pierced future Guan Qiong's body, allowing him to glimpse this existence. And it was this very thing he needed to use the heart-linking pill. Guan Qiong leaned forward, one hand holding the heart-linking pill, reaching inside. Future Guan Qiong resisted, but in this final moment, he unleashed all his might, countless tentacles tightly entangling everything, rendering him unable to move. Guan Qiong could not truly defeat himself, especially his more powerful future self. However, after consuming the potion from the future, he could evenly fight his future self, rendering the tentacles and all other tactics ineffective. Then, he fed him the pill. As Guan Qiong inserted the Liangxin pill into the chaotic mist, it instantly atomized and slowly seeped into it. Guan Qiong stepped back and placed another pill into his mouth. The pill melted in his mouth, as if he were swallowing a marshmallow instead of a pill. As the drug took effect, Guan Qiong began to feel something strange. An alternative perspective, a hazy memory, a future inclination, and utter silence and madness. Then, Guan Qiong felt nothing. The strange sensation vanished in an instant, as if the Liangxin pill's effects were only temporary. However, this was not the case. Guan Qiong looked up at his future self. The mist became clearer, and the wounds on his future self's body healed at an incredibly fast rate, as if it were not a physical body, but some elemental entity. Simultaneously, his eyes regained clarity, the madness dissipated, and reason returned to his mind. The tentacles began to return along their original path, and the black figure and the all-annihilating force vanished beside future Guan Qiong. His lower body, no longer a frenzied tentacles, had transformed back into human form, becoming indistinguishable from Guan Qiong. Except for appearing larger, with a more ambiguous look in his eyes. "Occlumency?" Guan Qiong tentatively asked, facing his seemingly awakened future self. Yes, the same light appeared before future Guan Qiong, forming paragraphs of text as he gazed. Seeing too much of the future reduces the possibilities for future development. Once you see it, the future is set, and at that point, you'll have no choice. Future Guan Qiong also mentioned the word choice. Looking at the words floating before him, Guan Qiong fell silent. He lowered his head, gazing at Luna, who slept in this space. The choice is about Luna, it's about many people, the future Guan Qiong sighed, looking up at the sky. He seemed to be able to see through this space into a distant place. There, Hermione and the other two were carrying on their story. They seemed to have found Scabbers, and Sirius Black had recovered and was seeking revenge on Peter Pettigrew. Then, they would enter the Shrieking Shack, where werewolves Lupin and Snape would also arrive. Finally, Harry would understand everything, who betrayed his father and who truly loved him. In the end, Peter Pettigrew escaped, and Sirius Black also avoided being captured and killed in Azkaban. Crookshanks, the ginger cat who played a key role in this, also known as Adriana, was unable to stop it. She was sealed in her bestial state, while Pettigrew could draw on Voldemort's power. That mad, destructive beast. I should have thought of this earlier. This moment, the time turner, and the choice of the future. Guan Qiong also looked up, gazing into the distance. To this world's story, we are outsiders, and my memories only cover the first 3 Harry Potter books. This means the choice is now, join in, or leave completely. If it were first year, I would have chosen to leave. This is Harry Potter's story, Hermione Granger's story, Ron's story, Luna's story, their story. I'm just a bystander, wanting to travel this world and find my own story, but for me now, they're inseparable. Guan Qiong's story has long been connected to Harry Potter's, Hermione's, and Luna's stories. I can't bear to leave, even though I know they will have a happy ending. It's just that, after I join, it seems the future isn't going to be a happy one. Guan Qiong looked at his future self. Future Guan Qiong didn't answer. He simply looked at his past self, faced with a choice, a flicker of pain in his eyes. You can make your choice now, a light flashed before him. If I choose to leave, everything will disappear, right? You and the rest of the painful future. The power of time will erase the events of 3rd grade, like the peaceful ruins of a bomb blast. I won't remember a thing. Guan Qiong looked at her future self. They'll be fine too. Future Guan Qiong looked at the peacefully sleeping Luna, a tenderness in her eyes. Guan Qiong looked at her future self and suddenly smiled. All the adverse circumstances in the world are caused by lack of ability, aren't they? Didn't you come back to save her? I choose to stay, no matter what happens in the future. I also believe that I can change all the adverse circumstances in the future, even if it means traveling through time and experiencing unbearable loneliness for ordinary people. You've made your choice." Future Guan Qiong looked at her past self and smiled. In an instant, the smoke dissipated, and the entire space vanished into thin air, as if it had never existed. At the same time, in the distant sky, an illusory dark mark appeared. It was a skull, and a python emerged from its mouth. Chapter 366 Voldemort. Harry felt like he was going mad. First, while comforting Hagrid, he discovered the missing rat Scabbers. Then, the ominous black dog that had been haunting him turned out to be real and had carried Ron away. Finally, they followed a black dog, bypassing the Whomping Willow and through a hidden passage into the Shrieking Shack, only to discover that the black dog was actually Sirius Black. He had been living as an animagus and hiding from the Dementors. As for Crookshanks, who had been helping him, honestly, a cat wasn't enough to hold their attention in such a chaotic situation. Then, Professor Lupin arrived. He tracked them down using the Marauder's map and reunited with Sirius. Harry then realized they had been friends all along with his father and Peter Pettigrew. And then, the story took a shocking turn. Peter Pettigrew was still alive, and it was actually Scabbers, and it wasn't Sirius Black who had betrayed his father, but Peter Pettigrew. Then, Professor Snape arrived, and things descended into chaos. Harry couldn't make out what was happening. He only knew that with the appearance of the full moon, Professor Lupin had transformed into a werewolf, and Peter Pettigrew had taken the opportunity to escape. Then, with Professor Lupin drawn elsewhere, he and Hermione followed Sirius's footsteps, chasing Pettigrew. They reached the lake, and then he saw them. Dementors, at least 100 of them, pressed darkly along the lake's edge. The cold instantly froze the surface to ice. In front of the Dementors, Sirius Black and Crookshanks faced the transformed Pettigrew. Pettigrew, unsure of what was happening, felt his short, plump body suspended in midair. Countless black mists rose from his form, forming the shape of a skull. This black mist, in turn, attracted the Dementors, who swirled around him, emitting a sharp, whistling sound. They first spotted Peter Pettigrew and cheered at his frothing animality. Then they spotted Sirius Black, realizing he was a prisoner who had escaped from their clutches, a savage food. Then, the Dementors circled and began advancing on Sirius. No, he's innocent, don't come near. Exopatronus, Exopatronus! Harry ran to Sirius, who had fallen to the ground, suffocated by the cold, and waved his wand, shouting, trying to drive the Dementors away. But the sheer number of Dementors had transformed the surroundings into a realm of madness, and it was difficult for him to maintain a clear mind, let alone think of something joyful and powerful enough to generate the emotional strength. No, Harry cried, struggling, but his voice grew fainter and colder. Some of the Dementors began to approach him, and he could even hear the gurgling breaths, like a cold winter wind, giving him goosebumps. Then, a Dementor reached him, raised its rotting hands, and removed its hood. It wanted to absorb Harry's happiness, along with his soul. At that moment, a silver figure descended before them all. Swinging its silver sword, a sharp blast of energy flew out, cleaving all the surrounding Dementors. After a sizzling sound, they reluctantly fled from Harry and the others, circling Peter Pettigrew's body. John, Hermione shouted joyfully, watching the figure soar through the air. It was Guan Qiong, who had arrived at top speed after dealing with Luna. Having already chosen to stay, she could use the last bit of her memory of Harry Potter to keep Pettigrew, the man who had helped Voldemort resurrect, and disrupt his plans. While this would plunge the future into chaos and uncertainty, making it different from the Harry Potter story, Guan Qiong didn't know what the future would hold. Since she had decided to stay, she decided to let the future unfold according to her own wishes. Guan Qiong flew past Hermione and Harry, leaving behind Jurmungandr. Jurmungandr grew in the wind, instantly transforming into a giant snake that coiled around them, protecting them. Guan Qiong then charged directly at Peter Pettigrew. The future potion's duration was limited, and his recent battle with his future self had already expended considerable magical energy and mental focus. Therefore, a quick victory was essential. Arriving before Peter Pettigrew, Guan Qiong gazed upon the dense black fog that seemed to devour all light. A solemn look flashed in Guan Qiong's eyes, and he extended his wand with a powerful wave. The patron saint, the embodiment of divinity, charged at a group of Dementors with unparalleled brilliance. Its powerful divinity forced them to retreat, ceding Peter Pettigrew's position. Simultaneously, Guan Qiong swung his wand, shattering the surface of the lake, and then erected ice walls with the water, temporarily keeping them out. The divine avatar began charging toward Peter Pettigrew. A brilliant light merged with a dense black mist, like water meeting fire. But Guan Qiong's eyes gleamed, and he tapped his wand. The divine power he had previously imbued within Pettigrew's soul, drawing him to Hogwarts, was summoned, and a dot of light shone on Pettigrew's forehead, guiding him. The divine avatar swung its sword, thrusting it forward, following the path indicated by the dot. As if a passage had been created, the black mist in its path was split in two, unable to stop the silver lightsaber's onslaught. At this crucial moment, Pettigrew's expression suddenly became strange. With a strange smile, he looked at Guan Qiong. As if suddenly possessed by intelligence, the surrounding black mist transformed into black snakes, entwining the divine avatar in its sword, blocking its attack. What a familiar smell, divinity. Thanks to this divinity, I was able to wake up from that crazy bestiality, Peter Pettigrew hissed, looking at Guan Qiong with cold and cruel eyes. Guan Qiong just looked at him silently, waving the wand in his hand repeatedly. Fire spells, freezing spells, cutting spells and all kinds of magic flew out and flew towards Peter Pettigrew as if they were free. Oh, I forgot, you are a mute. It's ridiculous that Dumbledore chose you as the heir, but Peter Pettigrew just smiled and waved his hand. Countless black mists around him rushed towards those magics, collided with them, and then offset them one by one. He looked at Guan Qiong sarcastically, with a cruel smile, and said, he may have forgotten that a mute can never be the greatest wizard. Chapter 367 Time Loop. Guan Qiong had no desire to chat with Voldemort. Not to mention that chatting with an enemy using a light point would inherently be a disadvantage. Guan Qiong wasn't the talkative type, especially once he determined his target. Therefore, towards Peter Pettigrew, who had been projected by Voldemort's consciousness and animal nature, Guan Qiong simply waved his wand, causing more magic to emanate from him. Freezing spells, cutting spells, crushing spells, and fire spells. Simultaneously, his body rapidly transformed, his animagus form appearing, his limbs morphing into tentacles. These twisted, emanating spiritual threads from them, reaching towards Pettigrew, attempting to control his body. Although his magical power had been greatly depleted and his spirit was somewhat exhausted, Guan Qiong gritted his teeth and persevered, determined to keep Pettigrew here. However, as Guan Qiong's body began to transform into an animagus form, Pettigrew sneered, pointed his finger at Guan Qiong, and muttered in an ancient language. Madness! The tentacles instantly lost control and began to spiral back towards Guan Qiong. Meanwhile, Guan Qiong's body also lost control, transforming into an animagus form. His upper body, which had intended to transform, also began to do so. Soon, it was no longer Guan Qiong, but a spirit worm, suspended in midair. Peter Pettigrew, however, didn't linger. He glanced at Guan Qiong with disdain, then at Harry, protected by Jormungandr behind Guan Qiong. His eyes were cold. But thinking of the short distance from Hogwarts Castle and the disgusting protective spell on Harry Potter, he ultimately did nothing and simply flew backwards. Countless Dementors followed him, like his subordinates. Guan Qiong tried to detain him, but it was too late. All his tentacles seemed to have a mind of their own. One tied itself to another, while a third weaved in between, binding the first two. Meanwhile, his mind began to fog, and even the levitation spell he cast was somewhat uncontrollable. Fortunately, this condition didn't last long. As Guan Qiong returned his divine nature to his true self, the distorted sensations finally subsided. However, he couldn't release his animagus form for a short while, and by then, Peter Pettigrew had already departed. Guan Qiong flew downwards, landing steadily on Hermione's head with a soft sigh. Jormungandr also shrank and vanished, returning to Guan Qiong's hand. "June, how are you?" Hermione asked with concern, tugging at the tentacle dangling from her head. Harry, standing by, watched in amazement, especially the final appearance of Voldemort's consciousness and Guan Qiong's transformation. It turned out that the hat was Guan Qiong. "I'll have to maintain this form for a while." "It'll be fine after a while." Guan Qiong's tentacle extended, the light appearing tired and dim. Fighting his future self was already a demanding task, not to mention running to their rescue. Furthermore, Voldemort's recent tactics had taken a toll on his mental state. "So what should we do now?" Harry asked from the side, looking worriedly at Sirius Black lying on the ground. He had been deeply affected by the Dementors and was still trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up. Gwen raised her eyes and glanced around, then at Crookshanks, who lay motionless beside Sirius. After a moment's thought, a light gathered in front of Harry and Hermione. "Leave him here. Someone will come to take him away." "Who will come?" "Only people from the school will come, and they will only hand Sirius over to the Ministry of Magic." Harry hesitated. What happened to Buckbeak? Gwen didn't answer Harry's question, but instead asked about something else. Buckbeak was executed. Fudge from the Ministry of Magic brought people over. They beheaded Buckbeak outside Hagrid's room, Harry said sadly, while Hermione hesitated and remained silent. "Did you see it with your own eyes?" Gwen continued. "No, I just heard the noise," Hermione replied immediately. "That's it, then. Let's go, Hermione, Harry. Everything will be fine. Professor Snape's coming this way. You need to deal with him first. Trust me, Sirius will be fine." Guan Qiong pointed in their direction with her tentacles, her body wearily slumped over Hermione's head. She felt a bit sleepy. Hermione squeezed Guan Qiong's head, sensing her fatigue. "In that case, let's go, Harry. Trust Qiong, he won't lie to us," Hermione said. "I understand." Harry gritted his teeth and glanced at Sirius Black lying on the ground. He knew it would be troublesome if Snape found him. Snape had just found the Shrieking Shack and was sending Sirius Black and Professor Lupin to Azkaban. If he hadn't suddenly intervened and knocked Snape unconscious, things would have gotten out of hand. However, Professor Lupin had just transformed at the sight of the full moon, and Peter Pettigrew had broken free and escaped again. Sirius chased after him, and everything became chaotic. Hermione and Harry led Jean out of the forest, leaving Sirius Black and Crookshanks behind. Shortly after they left, two figures appeared from another direction. It was Harry and Hermione, leading the executed Buckbeak to Sirius Black and Crookshanks. "Did Jean just see us?" Harry asked, somewhat surprised. "Obviously. Quickly, get Sirius onto Buckbeak. Snape will be here soon." "Crookshanks, find someplace to hide," Hermione said. She and Harry helped the unconscious Sirius onto Buckbeak and quickly pulled him away from the lake. A moment later, Snape returned, carrying Harry and Hermione, looking around suspiciously. "Like I said, when we chased after them, we didn't see anyone. Peter Pettigrew and Sirius Black are gone," Harry shouted to Snape, staring around in wonder. Sirius Black was truly missing. What had happened? Was someone helping them? "Peter Pettigrew is dead, blown to pieces. Don't give in to those wishful thinking, or I'll have to confine you to the hospital for a few days, Mr. Potter. Oh, and that's about to be added to your sneak attack on the professor. Gryffindor will lose a lot of points for that," Snape said coldly. He glanced around and reluctantly led the two away. As they retreated, the tentacles dangling from the cat and cat bug on Hermione's head lifted and waved towards a spot on the forest, as if waving. Chapter 368 Ending. Upon returning to Hogwarts, they were undoubtedly brought before the headmaster. Snape solemnly denounced their actions and demanded that Gryffindor be deducted over 50 house points. Fortunately, no one was hurt, except the Weasley boy. He was attacked by Sirius and has a broken leg. "He's been taken to the hospital," Snape said sternly to Dumbledore. "Is that so?" Sirius Black, Peter Pettigrew, and Professor Lupin, with a headache. Dumbledore first glanced at the cat in the hat, lying motionless on Hermione's head, exuding fatigue and weariness, before returning his gaze to Harry and Hermione. "He's innocent, Professor Dumbledore." Sirius Black. "It was Peter Pettigrew who betrayed everyone. He joined Voldemort. I saw it with my own eyes, and he's still alive," Harry passionately defended his godfather. "It's clearly a confusion charm. Mr. Potter has been deceived into believing Peter Pettigrew is still alive and that Sirius Black is wrongly accused," Snape said grimly from the side. "Perhaps that's true." Dumbledore took off his glasses and wiped them on the edge of his shirt, like an elderly man with a confused mind. "Professor Dumbledore," Harry shouted excitedly. "So, will this all end well?" Dumbledore put his glasses back on, muttering as if to himself, or perhaps asking someone else. Pussycat nodded. "Then let's do this. Harry and Miss Granger, return to the Gryffindor common room. Professor Snape and I will deal with Professor Lupin's case. As for Sirius Black, the Dementors will catch up to him, as long as he doesn't get too far." Dumbledore made his decision and addressed Snape, who was standing by his side. "He can no longer teach at the school. Many people have heard the werewolf's voice, Snape said viciously. That's a real headache. We'll have to find a new defense against the dark arts professor, Dumbledore sighed, leaving with Snape. An excited Harry was also pulled away by Hermione, back to the Gryffindor common room. What should we do next, Jean? Hermione asked Gwen, who was standing above her, as Harry stared at her with confusion. Of course, we should go and make things a happy ending. Save Buckbeak and Sirius Black. Gwen extended a tentacle, illuminating it in front of Hermione and Harry. At the same time, another tentacle extended and removed the time turner from around Hermione's neck. He was so exhausted that he didn't think much of it. The gliding tentacle made Hermione blush slightly, but she didn't show it. About 3 hours ago, I'll use the power of time to send you both back. From now on, it's up to you. Gwen's body slowly swam down from Hermione's head, extending 2 tentacles and pointing at the 2 of them. Aren't you going? Hermione asked. She had assumed Gwen would accompany them. I can't go. I've already taken up my entire time. If I go in, there'll be problems, maybe a conflict or something. Guan Qiong clapped his tentacles at his mouth and yawned loudly. Besides, I'm already exhausted today. What are you talking about? 3 hours ago, Harry watched Guan Qiong and Hermione's exchange in confusion, completely confused. You'll find out in a moment. Guan Qiong extended his tentacles, turned the hour hand on the time turner, and then directed the resulting power towards the 2 people before him. Harry and Hermione instantly vanished from Guan Qiong's sight, as if they had never existed. The time turner in Guan Qiong's hand also vanished. The next moment, Harry and Hermione reappeared from outside the Gryffindor common room, Harry's face filled with surprise and joy. John, we did it, Harry shouted excitedly. They had just traveled back 3 hours. Not only had they pulled Buckbeak away from the firing squad, but they had also used Buckbeak to allow Sirius Black to escape, avoiding Snape's detection and the Dementor's pursuit. Of course, he had also agreed with Sirius Black to correspond during the summer vacation. If possible, he could even be brought to Sirius Black's house during the summer vacation, eliminating the need to return to number 4 Privet Drive and Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia's homes. It seems everything is going well. Guan Qiong waved his tentacle, looking at Harry and Hermione beside him. He had actually seen the 2 of them earlier by the lake. After all, with his magical vision, his perception was far superior to that of ordinary wizards. Plus, this was the last part of the original novel he remembered. Seeing everything completed successfully, he was also happy. Although Peter Pettigrew had escaped, overall, there weren't any major surprises. As for Pettigrew, he always had a way. Although he didn't know what the story would develop later, he still remembered some of the major plot points, such as the Deathly Hallows and the resurrection of the Goblet of Fire. Although he didn't know the details, he could already use them to deploy defenses and, by the way, target Voldemort. No matter what, he wouldn't let an unfavorable future happen to him. Even if it did, he would reverse the course of time and set everything right. His final days at school weren't eventful. The exam results came out quickly, and Gryffindor, unsurprisingly, won the House Cup, largely due to their outstanding performance in the Quidditch Cup and Snape's request for point deductions, which Dumbledore had rejected. Before the holiday break, Ron invited Harry, Hermione, and Gwen to the Quidditch World Cup that summer. His father had been able to secure a good number of tickets, and Gwen was the one he particularly invited. If you go to the match, you'll definitely fall in love with this sport. Believe me, there's nothing more fun and exciting than this, Ron repeated in Gwen's ear whenever he could during his final days. Okay, I'll meet you at Ottery St. Catchpole, the Wheel Eyes Village, then, Gwen nodded. While he had other things to do during the summer, he still had time to attend the Quidditch Cup. Although he still didn't share Harry and Ron's passion and interest in the sport, as a casual observer, he still wanted to watch the excitement of a major international event. Eastern people love to join in the fun. Joan, do you have any other plans for the summer? Hermione asked before boarding the express train. Yet, I'm planning on looking around, looking for famous castles and buildings. Maybe I'll meet some interesting people. Guan Qiong gazed into the distance, her expression filled with anticipation. End of Volume 4. Chapter 369 Riddle Mansion. The villagers of Little Hangleton still call the house Riddle House, even though the Riddles haven't lived there for years. Perched on a hillside, it commands a commanding view of the village. It was once a beautiful, large, stately home, a place every villager dreamed of living in, but now they want to get as far away from it as possible. It's now damp and desolate, its windows boarded up, its roof tiles chipped, and creepers scrambling all over. And, 50 years ago, a strange and horrific event occurred here. The Riddles, their adult son Tom, and the elderly couple, had all died of suffocation. Furthermore, the doctor who examined the bodies made the curious discovery that the Riddles hadn't been harmed by poison, sharp weapons, or a pistol, nor had they died from suffocation or strangulation. In fact, they appeared perfectly healthy, and aside from their death, they were no different from ordinary people. Judging by their terrified expressions, it seemed they had died of fright, though no one knew what could have frightened 3 people to death simultaneously. The Riddle family's gardener was the first suspect. He was already eccentric, and the battlefield had transformed him into a different kind of person, making him unpopular with the villagers. Furthermore, he had a spare key to the back door, all of which gave him reason to suspect him. However, Frank stubbornly insisted that he had not committed the crime, adding that on the day the Riddles died, a teenage boy had been seen near the house. The boy had black hair and a pale complexion, looking very strange. However, no one took his story seriously, as no one in the village had ever seen such a boy. However, after a thorough investigation, no evidence was found to prove Frank's involvement in the Riddle family's murders, and he was ultimately released. Frank did not leave. Even though the villagers were wary of him, he remained, seemingly with nowhere else to go. He continued to tend the gardens at the Riddle mansion, doing the same things he always did, regardless of who owned the Riddle mansion. On an ordinary night, Frank, unsurprisingly, woke up to the pain of his bad leg. He was old, his hair graying, his hearing failing, and the pain in his leg worsening. He couldn't sleep peacefully without warming his knee with a hot water bottle each night. But the bottle always grew cold, and he always woke up in the middle of the night. Frank stood by the sink, filling it with hot water, as usual, looking toward the Riddle house. The windows upstairs in the Riddle house gleamed, as if someone had lit a light inside. Frank immediately understood what was going on. The village boys had broken into the old house and lit a lamp, or perhaps a fire. Influenced by their parents' and grandparents' attitudes toward Frank, they had little respect for the old man. Although Frank didn't need it, the boys still caused him trouble, throwing rocks at windows and macing up the smooth lawn, causing him considerable trouble. Now, perhaps not satisfied with their previous mischief, they had broken into the Riddle house. No, we can't let them stay in there any longer. We have to get them out, quickly. Frank thought to himself, dragging his bad leg back upstairs. He dressed, retrieved a rusty old key hanging high up, picked up his cane, and walked out into the night. He didn't need a light, even in the pitch black. He made his way precisely around the back of the house. Stopping at a door obscured by ivy, he pulled out his old key and silently opened it. He first walked through the cavernous kitchen, then down the hallway, onto the landing, and turned right. At the end of the hallway, bursts of light emanated from the room at the far end, as if countless lamps were lit. Frank, cane tightly gripped in his hand, walked towards that direction. Then, he saw a boy. Frank almost thought it was the boy he had seen 50 years ago. They looked about the same age, 15 or 16, with black hair, bright eyes, and a striking appearance. In a split second, Frank could tell the difference between the two. The one standing inside was an Oriental boy, and his face wasn't pale. Just then, Frank suddenly heard a moving sound, like something slithering through the dark corridor, coming from behind him. Frank nervously turned around and saw, with horror, a giant snake. At least 12 feet long, its undulating body glowed red, and flames occasionally flashed from its surface. Frank almost thought he was still asleep in bed, having a strange dream. He saw a giant snake, its body ablaze with flames, yet it hadn't burned anything yet. He couldn't even feel the heat. But the snake didn't react. It simply glanced at Frank, then swam around him and landed at the boy's feet in the room. The boy then opened his eyes. He had been keeping them closed. Frank stared into the boy's pure black pupils, and in the next moment, he lost consciousness. A muggle? Guan Qiong looked at the old man standing outside the room and scratched his head. He hadn't expected to let a muggle walk right up to him without him noticing. He'd been so focused on searching for information that he'd neglected his surroundings. He'd have to be more careful next time. Guan Qiong warned himself. His fingers moved left and right, like a puppeteer manipulating a puppet. Frank, with a vacant look in his eyes, entered the room and sat down in the old, worn armchair. He'd just cast a puppetry charm and, of course, a sleeping charm, putting the unexpected intruder to sleep. Now, A memory charm was needed. Guan Qiong tapped his fingers gently, and magic flowed from his fingers, forming a circuit under his control. It then gently landed on the old man's head, causing him to forget what he'd witnessed that night. Because he couldn't use a wand during the summer vacation, Guan Qiong's movements were slow. Fortunately, these wands weren't difficult, and he was already able to cast spells silently and without a wand. Once everything was done, Guan Qiong breathed a sigh of relief, looking at Jormungandr hovering at his feet with a hint of resignation. Voldemort had escaped once again, and there wasn't much information left in the house. This was really bad news for Guan Qiong, especially since Voldemort had become aware of his pursuit, making his actions increasingly difficult. Chapter 370 Summer Vacation Trip. During the summer vacation, Guan Qiong tracked Voldemort's whereabouts. Forests, castles, swamps, riversides, wetlands. Following the faint messages left by Peter Pettigrew, Guan Qiong searched for them. Unfortunately, every time, they left long before Guan Qiong arrived, and the information they left behind became increasingly scarce. Guan Qiong even lost track of their destination. It was a real problem, a problem that had eluded Dumbledore for so many years. Even if only a remnant remained, it would be difficult to truly capture, let alone solve. Guan Qiong sighed as he looked around at the dilapidated Riddle Mansion. Having decided to participate in the main storyline, Guan Qiong would certainly not leave Voldemort, the #1 threat to the wizarding world and Harry and his friends, unattended. While he didn't know what happened at school during 4th year, Guan Qiong knew one thing: Voldemort had resurrected at the end of that year. And the potential challenges he might face in the future related to Luna would undoubtedly be linked to Voldemort. However, Voldemort was so elusive that he couldn't find a chance to strike. Furthermore, there were Horcruxes. Guan Qiong had hoped that, with a bit of luck, he might stumble upon a few of Voldemort's Horcruxes and then find a way to destroy them. While he didn't know the exact Horcruxes, his magical vision could tell them apart. Furthermore, the snake named Nagini, which accompanied Voldemort, was a known Horcrux and his target. Unfortunately, he never found a chance to use Jormungandr. Touching the head of Jormungandr at his feet, Guan Qiong stored it in a ring and looked at Frank, who lay beside him, feeling somewhat helpless. The last time he triggered his bestiality, it was likely Voldemort's last resort. But Jormungandr was something Voldemort couldn't handle. It was a shame that he'd kept an eye on Hermione's safety and placed it near her to protect her. Otherwise, Peter Pettigrew might not have escaped. Without Pettigrew's help, Voldemort's actions wouldn't have been so smooth. Run, run. Who can escape like you? Voldemort, if you have the guts, run away forever and never come out. Guan Qiong thought through gritted teeth. But perhaps he should change his mindset. Guan Qiong stroked his chin, a thought suddenly flashing through his mind. These days, whenever he spotted any trace of Voldemort or Peter Pettigrew, he'd chase them straight after them. Pettigrew and Voldemort fled swiftly, leaving Guan Qiong no chance. This left Guan Qiong feeling powerless. What if he didn't take action, but waited, waiting for Voldemort to reveal more information, perhaps even his entire head? A glint of determination flashed in Guan Qiong's eyes, and his right hand slashed down heavily, like a severed blade. Then, even if he couldn't kill Voldemort, he'd inflict severe damage, hindering his resurrection. He could then use this time to search for something that might be Voldemort's Horcrux and eliminate him immediately. Guan Qiong reconsidered his decision, glanced around, and saw that there was nothing worth leaving behind before exiting Riddle House. Frank followed him, like a walking corpse. Outside the window, darkness shrouded the world like an ocean. Deep in the dense forest east of Little Hangleton, a figure panted heavily, nervously cradling a swaddled baby. He glanced up, making sure the disturbing figure hadn't caught up. A flicker of joy flashed in his tiny eyes. He didn't catch up. Wormtail. We didn't leave enough information this time. He won't know where we're going. A voice pierced the bones of the swaddle, colder than the forest wind. Yes, Master. This is all thanks to your wisdom and bravery, Peter Pettigrew said in a trembling voice, his eyes still scanning the surroundings, as if wary, yet also afraid to look down at the contents of the swaddle. If I were truly wise and brave, I wouldn't be chased by a 15-year-old mute. Ho ha ho ha. Who would have thought the renowned Dark Lord would be pursued by a wizard who hadn't even graduated yet? The voice from within the swaddle carried a deep chill, colder than winter's ice and snow. With all due respect, Master, he is, after all, Dumbledore's successor, the next greatest wizard. Common sense doesn't apply to his predictions. And didn't you say the ring on his finger is stronger than most wizards? That's not his strength, but the power of the magic item, Peter Pettigrew said nervously, afraid to anger the creature within. That's certainly stronger than most wizards. But who can truly claim to be a match for a basilisk carrying around a serpent? The voice said coldly. It was precisely because of that thing that he hadn't returned to settle accounts with the Oriental boy. Peter Pettigrew and him combined wouldn't be enough for the snake to swallow in one gulp. While he wouldn't die, the strength he had accumulated for so long, the body he had painstakingly created, couldn't be wasted. But, after all, he's a mute. He'll never become the greatest wizard. The next moment, the voice within the swaddling clothes chuckled sarcastically, amusement in its tone. Yes, my master, the greatest wizard is you, and you will always be, Peter Pettigrew said flatteringly. HMPH, don't worry about that mute anymore. He can't possibly catch up to us. Wormtail, it's time to execute the next plan, the voice from the swaddling clothes said coldly. A look of struggle suddenly crossed Peter Pettigrew's face. After a long moment, he spoke hesitantly, Master, please forgive me. Why did you have to choose that boy? He's under strict protection now, and it's far too difficult to harm him. If I could use another wizard, I guarantee I could bring back a suitable candidate in a short time. That's a great idea. Find a replacement, and then I'll be struck down by the boy's magic once again, and you can take the opportunity to escape from me, Wormtail. That's a great idea. The voice from the swaddling clothes was icy cold, like a sword pressed against Peter Pettigrew's heart, making him shudder. Master, I absolutely have no such intention, Master. I have no intention of leaving you. I am completely loyal to you, Master, Peter Pettigrew said tremblingly. I know loyalty better than any of you, Wormtail. Don't try to deceive me. You're just a coward, the voice from the swaddling child whispered softly. You were chased by that mute, so you returned to me. If you had anywhere else to go, you would never come back. You're even willing to be a little pet mouse for this, Wormtail. Right, Master, Peter Pettigrew said, trembling. That's enough, Wormtail. I don't need your loyalty. You just need to continue to be afraid. As for the plan, let's proceed as usual. I just want the boy. Yes, Master. Chapter 371 Romania. Harry lay stretched out in bed, panting heavily, as if he'd just run. He stroked his forehead, where a lightning-like scar had been. It had been there since he was a baby, and it had remained there until today. It lay quietly, and most of the time, Harry almost forgot about it. But sometimes, it would stir, becoming hot, as if someone were pressing a red-hot wire against his forehead. The pain rippled from the surface of his skin to the depths of his soul, causing his body to tremble uncontrollably. This meant that the person who had caused the scar was nearby, and it sensed a shared power, so it cheered. Harry blinked, turned on the nearby lamp, got out of bed, retrieved his hidden wand, drew aside the curtains, and peered nervously outside. That man, the mysterious figure, the Dark Lord, the nightmare of the wizarding world, had he come to find him? The street outside remained silent at night, a fitting sign for Privet Drive, a place known for its respectability, where no rogues would make a noise in the middle of the night. The curtains on both sides were tightly drawn, and Harry couldn't make out anything. But what was going on? Harry touched his scar in confusion, remembering the scene from his dream. It seemed to be in a dense forest, and a familiar figure loomed large in his memory. It was Peter Pettigrew, the man who betrayed his parents. At the end of his third year, Voldemort's power had allowed him to escape, and even Gwen couldn't stop him. And then there was another voice, cold, cruel, and venomous. Just hearing it made Harry's heart tremble. It had to be Voldemort's voice. It seemed they were far away, the nearest dense forest surrounding Privet Drive a good distance away. Harry wondered, what were they doing? It seemed like they were plotting something, some sort of plan. Harry's brow furrowed, but dreams weren't always clear, only fragments of information had been absorbed, leaving him with no idea what was going on. Confused, Harry tightened his wand and glanced at Hedwig, sleeping soundly in her cage beside him. Perhaps he should talk to someone he knew at Hogwarts. But who should he ask? Hermione? She'd definitely tell him to go to Headmaster Dumbledore immediately, and then she'd look through the books for answers. Ron? He'd probably ask Mr. Weasley, his father, and then the Wheel Eyes would all know about it. Harry would then have to constantly respond to their concerns, and Mrs. Weasley might even panic and lose all sleep. Guan Qiong? That was a good idea. Guan Qiong always solved all kinds of problems, and he was quite capable. Harry had witnessed his abilities in previous years. But Harry felt like he was missing something. Guan Qiong wasn't always in the same place. Last summer, for example, he'd gone on adventures somewhere and couldn't even find Hedwig. Oh, right. Serious. Harry's eyes lit up. He hurried to his desk, pulled out 2 sheets of parchment, dipped his quill in ink, and began writing about a pain in his scar. One sheet contained a long list of events from his summer vacation, Dudley's failed diet plan, the Dursleys' new courtesy to him now that they knew he had a wanted godfather, and other details. It was like a summer diary. Finally, Harry wrote about the pain in his scar and asked Sirius if he knew why. The other sheet was much shorter. After a simple greeting, Harry wrote about his scar and his request for help. A smile crossed Harry's face as he looked at the 2 sheets of parchment before him. He planned to have Hedwig deliver Sirius's first, so he could get a reply from him sooner. As for Gwen, it depended on whether Hedwig could find him this time. He didn't know where he was now. Romania. Gwen had just emerged from the fireplace when Charlie Weasley came to greet her. He was the middle son of the Weasleys, Ron's older brother. He was about the same size as his twins, but shorter and more robust than Percy and Ron. His muscles, much stronger than those of an average wizard, were clearly visible. He had a broad, gentlemanly face that didn't match his build. It looked weathered and freckled, and on one arm, a large, shiny scar from a fire burn. "How are you, Gwen? Did you have a smooth trip?" Charlie spotted Gwen among the group emerging from the communal fireplace. After all, there was only one Asian face. He grinned and reached out to shake Gwen's hand. Gwen felt the calluses and blisters on his hand. It went pretty smoothly. The flu network was very convenient. Gwen smiled and nodded, a dot of light floating between them. It was indeed quite convenient, like a high-speed train, just a few stops and you were there. After failing to find any trace of Voldemort, Guan Qiong had the idea of visiting Norma in Romania. The Quidditch World Cup was still some time away, and he had nothing else to do. Last year, there was a Two-Hearted Man expedition, but it took up his entire summer vacation. Otherwise, he could have come. "Oh, so this is the magic Ron was telling me about? Loomis can be done to this degree, it's amazing," Charlie exclaimed, turning to lead the way. "I came as soon as I got your letter. I'm so glad you came to see Norma. Many people claim to love dragons, but after a while, their interest fades and they just leave them to us and never take care of them again," Charlie said, half complaining. "I wanted to come last year, but other things got in the way during the summer." Guan Qiong's face was filled with frustration. Who knew that after entering the Cedar Tree, nurturing the Two-Hearted Man would take so long, almost missing the start of school? "It's not too late this year, and compared to last year, this year is a good time," Charlie said, and suddenly paused, not continuing. Guan Qiong did not ask, but just followed Charlie's footsteps. The wizard gathering place on this side of Romania is full of dragon features. 9 out of 10 shops on the streets along the way sell dragon-related things, including dragon scale ornaments, dragon flame storage containers, dragon dung fertilizer, dragon claw powder, dragon blood and even dragon hearts, dragon livers and other potion materials. There's even a huge dragon skull on the bar. Most of them are sub-dragon species. There are not many pure-blooded dragons. Killing and trading are not allowed. Natural deaths must be handled by the Ministry of Magic. Guan Qiong looked around, and Charlie explained. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 372 ready to go. The difference between a worm and a dragon lies in the purity of their bloodline, much like the difference between pure-blood wizards and muggle-born wizards. However, unlike wizards, some worms are the result of hybridization between dragons and other creatures, while others are simply mutated by absorbing dragon blood. This is why they are so numerous and produce a wide variety of materials. However, when buying and selling, merchants don't specifically mark their worms with the word "wom." I think so. Legend has it that bathing in dragon blood can grant great powers, but the dragon blood used in potions at Hogwarts only serves to bind potions together. Guan Qiong smiled. In reality, Real dragon blood doesn't grant great powers. Of course, it can enhance a certain degree, but that comes with significant side effects, so it's probably not worth the effort, Charlie said with a smile. He recalled that when he first went to Diagon Alley to buy things, he had thought that if he drank a mouthful of dragon blood, he wouldn't have to go to school. He actually didn't have to go to school because he fell ill and was a week late, missing the opening ceremony. Fortunately, Hogwarts still accepted him, and the Sorting Hat placed him in Gryffindor House. From then on, he became fascinated with all things dragon. The two walked and chatted, soon arriving at an ancient castle on the eastern side of the gathering place. Its turquoise-green stone bricks, white walls covered with greenery, and red tiles curled around a domed roof made it stand out from the crowd. Above the grey entrance gate, the words Romanian Fire Dragon Research Institute were engraved on a large plaque, hanging at the very top, visible to passing wizards. Let's take a day off. Tomorrow, a team will head to Mount Gemma to observe the autumn migration of the Ridgeback dragons. Then we'll go see Norma together. It's so different you won't recognize it, Charlie said to Guan Qiong. Thank you for the trouble, Guan Qiong replied with a smile. It's nothing. I'm happy to share this with those who care about fire dragons, but of course, they have to care for them sincerely, Charlie said. Upon entering the institute, the space inside was, unsurprisingly, much larger than it appeared from the outside. A massive dragon skeleton sat in the center, vividly alive, as if poised to spring to life. Bookshelves lined the walls on either side, a variety of books waiting to be read. Many books flew out of the shelves, landing throughout the building. Many also flew back, some still smelling of fresh ink. The Romanian bentwood dragon, the most distinctive dragon species in the region, breathes not ordinary fire but a scent of decay that accelerates the decomposition of corpses, whether animal or plant, Charlie explained to Guan Qiong. At the dragon's throat, the bones below the larynx were clearly visible, not a typical off-white color, but a deep green, riddled with holes, like a honeycomb. This is a rare specimen. When we first discovered it, it was disintegrating through its own breath. It's incredible to imagine the scene. Green rain poured from its mouth, fell from the sky, and then dissolved itself, meeting its death in this way, Charlie said in awe. Amazing, Guan Qiong nodded, sensing something special. Charlie guided Guan Qiong through the research center. The first floor was the exhibition area, where books and dragon bones were kept. The dragon bones were enormous, stretching through the entire third floor, in the center of the castle. The second floor was the research area, with several closed and enclosed rooms. Researchers there conducted various dragon-related studies, ranging from the catalytic applications of dragon blood plants to the seasonal influences on dragon migrations, and the use of dragon dung for herbal fertilization. The third floor was the living quarters, and Charlie found Guan Qiong a room facing Mount Gemma. The Gemma Mountains are a cluster of mountains. From this side, you can only see the grayish-white rocks of the main peak, surrounded by numerous mountain pillars. Clear green trees tuck into the lower slopes like a skirt. I'll come back tomorrow. After we see Norma, we can go back to Ottery St. Catchpole together. Ron said you'll be going to the Quidditch World Cup, right? Guan Qiong nodded, and Charlie left, content. A boy who loves both dragons and Quidditch, remarkable. More refined than his brothers, Charlie thought as he left. Guan Qiong gazed out the window at the Gemma Mountains in the distance. The peak stood like a stone forest. He seemed to hear the faint roar of a dragon, which stirred his anticipation. The next day arrived quickly. As a pink glimmer appeared in the east, there was a knock on Guan Qiong's door. Charlie opened the door and was standing outside with two others. Charlie held a bottle of pale green potion in his hand. Apply this to your neck, wrists, and ankles to conceal our presence. Let's set off immediately, Charlie said. Guan Qiong took the bottle of potion, examined it, and applied it according to Charlie's instructions. Charlie also introduced the two people beside him. Piers Kent, dragon health specialist, responsible for monitoring the dragon's health and serving as their doctor in the wild, Charlie said, pointing to a thin, bright-eyed man. The man's hands were thin, but his fingers were long, and his nails were sharp, somewhat like a dragon's claws. I'm glad Hogwarts has a student like you who loves dragons. The last time I was at Hogwarts, they were all interested in Quidditch, Piers said to Guan Qiong with a smile. Guan Qiong smiled and nodded. Jill Perez, dragon warlock, researches dragon magic. They firmly believe that dragons possess a different magical system from wizards and are trying to replicate it. Of course, They haven't had much success so far. Charlie then introduced another person, his tone a little helpless and teasing. Gilly had golden hair, reminding Guan Qiong of Lockhart, her second-year defense against the dark arts professor, though his eyes were the same black as Guan Qiong's. They've simply forgotten the abilities of their ancestors, just as we've lost some powerful ancient magic, Gilly said seriously, though Charlie and Pierce both wore forced smiles. Guan Qiong shook hands with him. Then we'll observe the autumn migration of the Gamma Ridgeback dragons. I hope we can all achieve the results we desire, but before that, we must remember our principles, Charlie concluded, and the other two grew serious as well. People don't harm dragons, and dragons don't harm people, the three said in unison. Chapter 373 Back Dragon Group. The Romanian sky was a sea blue, with white clouds floating above like tiny islands. Under the gentle sunlight, the lush green forests were filled with a peaceful atmosphere. It truly was a dreamlike place, thought Guan Qiong as she followed Charlie and the other two to the Gemma Mountains. Beneath the Gemma Mountains lay endless green forests and lakes, where the cries of creatures could be heard. Above, grayish-white rocks rose like pillars of jade piercing the sky, many of which contained vast caverns, deep and dark. When winter arrives, the dragons of the Gemma Mountains retreat to their mountaintop caves to rest, awaiting the arrival of the next spring. During this time, they rarely hunt, relying on stored food and their own bodies to survive, Charlie explained to Guan Qiong, pointing to the massive caverns high on the mountainside. Autumn is when they migrate, seeking caves and hunting for nourishment. During this time, dragons fight less, and their focus shifts to more food. Of course, some exceptional dragons will steal food from others to survive the cold winter, but fortunately, Romania's fire dragons don't have that problem. The dragon tribe is complex and diverse, and the research materials would fill an entire library. If you're interested, come here every holiday, Charlie said. I'll try. Guan Qiong observed their surroundings carefully. After a while, they had penetrated deep into the Gemma Mountains. The dragon roars in the air grew louder, almost as if they were right beside their ears. I'm looking forward to it, Charlie said with a smile, looking ahead. We're here. Ahead is the Ridgeback herd we observed before. It's a newly emerged group, including not only Norwegian Ridgebacks, but also North Sea Ridgebacks, Mountain Ridgebacks, and Crooked River Ridgebacks. Their leader is Norma. As Charlie finished speaking, they arrived at a massive stone platform. The space ahead suddenly opened up, revealing a vast forest dotted with lakes like diamonds. The lake closest to Guan Qiong and the others was a blue eye. Giant dragons swam in it, while others rested by its edge. The dragons' backs prominently displayed a jet-black ridge, their wings streaked with black spikes like soldiers' spears, and their red eyes shone brightly like lava. Guan Qiong spotted the most distinctive one immediately. It stood at the very center of the entire Ridgeback pack, nearly twice the size of the other dragons. Its broad wings, adorned with jet-black spikes and streaked with blue lines, gave it a sense of lightness. Its head, meanwhile, appeared smaller than the others, yet it possessed a sense of harmony. Norma, when it was delivered 2 years ago, it was only 7 feet, approximately 2 meters, at the time, but now it's grown to approximately 33 feet, 10 meters. Compared to other dragons its age, its growth is exceptionally high, which is why it's able to lead a pack. The other young dragons recognized its potential and separated from their parents to form a new Ridgeback pack with it, Charlie said, or rather, explained to Guan Qiong. It's hard to imagine. Guan Qiong gazed deeply at the enormous dragon below, his eyes a bit hazy, a faint reflection of his past. Back then, it was so small, like a tooth, its head resting on his lap. He placed a book on its head, and the two of them, man and dragon, enjoyed some leisure time in Hagrid's hut. Yes, it's incredible. It challenged adult dragons and suffered considerable injuries. But not only did it heal, it became even stronger than before. Its pack has also faced challenges from other dragons in this land, including Romanian longhorns and Welsh green dragons, but it has triumphed. Based on our observations, it's likely to grow to 70 to 100 feet, 20 to 30 meters, becoming the king of all dragons. As Charlie was introducing the creature, Norma's nose twitched slightly, its massive head lifted, and it gazed around in confusion. Then, it turned toward the stone platform, as if it had spotted a few people. What's going on? Pierce asked, puzzled. Charlie pulled Guan Qiong back, hiding them within the stone platform. They had all been smeared with a potion that concealed their presence, so the dragon shouldn't have noticed them. Perhaps it's some other movement, pray, Gilly asked, pushing down his golden hair to avoid detection. But their actions were too late. With a deafening roar, a massive wind surged upward, rustling the surrounding leaves. In a flash, a massive figure loomed above them, casting a shadow across the stone platform. It was Norma. The blue markings on its massive wings shone ethereal in the sunlight, reminiscent of a wind spirit. "Be careful," Charlie shouted, drawing his wand and placing it in front of Guan Qiong. The other two also drew their wands, their lights flickering. Although the observation was conducted in secret, adhering to the principle of non-interference, the researchers had a plan for the dragons if they accidentally discovered them and disturbed them. Fighting was impossible, but escape was possible. For example, Charlie's wand was flashing with a stunning spell. It wouldn't completely stun the dragons, but it would confuse them. Gilly and Pierce's wands glowed with shielding and blinding charms. Once they were out of the dragon's sight, escape would be a simple matter. But Guan Qiong pulled Charlie back. "It remembers me." A point of light appeared before Charlie. Without seeing Guan Qiong move, his body levitated, reaching the same height as Norma. "Guan Qiong," Charlie called out, but Guan Qiong was already in front of Norma, making him afraid to move. The distance between them was too close. If Norma was angered, Guan Qiong could easily be injured. Norma's enormous amber-red eyes reflected Guan Qiong's image. He extended his head and slowly approached Guan Qiong. Under the tense gaze of the three people below, Guan Qiong was held aloft by Norma. Once Guan Qiong grasped Norma's massive horns, he raised his head and let out a mighty roar. The sound was passionate and high-pitched, filled with deep joy. Mom, Gile's eyes were a little dazed. As a dragon language expert, he could understand the meaning of Norma's roar, but this also confused him. Chapter 374 Problems in the Dragon Clan. By the lake, Charlie and the other two looked at Guan Qiong, held high above Norma's head, feeling unsure what to do. It's hard to believe Norma still remembers him after all this time. Logically, dragons, as they grow, understand the relationship between themselves and the humans who hatched them, Gile said to Charlie, looking at Guan Qiong in disbelief. Guan Qiong had been brought to the lake by Norma, and they naturally followed, standing at the edge of the Ridgeback dragon colony. Norma summoned the other Ridgeback dragons over, and Norma, like a treasured treasure, lifted Guan Qiong high up on his head and introduced him to the other dragons in his colony. "Yes, it's hard to understand," Charlie remarked. "Many wizards desire to keep a dragon as a pet, even if it's illegal. When they hatch dragons from eggs, the young dragons become incredibly dependent on them, even considering them their mothers. But dragons are highly intelligent creatures. As they mature, they understand the difference between themselves and the wizard. They quickly develop self-awareness and realize that this creature, so unlike them, is not their mother. At this point, some dragons will simply leave, relying on their instincts and wild nature to return to nature, while others will turn against the wizard and even harm him. Only a very few, even understanding this relationship, will remain with the wizard, treating him as their most dependable family. Norma is undoubtedly one of them." Meanwhile, Guan Qiong stood above Norma, gazing down at her, and sensed a distinct aura. It was his own magical energy. He glanced at Norma's wings, where the blue lines on them revealed his magical energy most clearly. It seemed to be the magical energy he had deposited upon Norma's birth with a levitation charm, which had been absorbed by the wizard, resulting in this effect. Suddenly, several dragons roared in anger, their voices directed at Guan Qiong. Guan Qiong turned to look. Several black-gray spinnerback dragons glared at him with venomous eyes, flames brewing from their mouths. "Roar!" Norma glared angrily, raising his forelimbs and slamming them down on the ground. The sound, combined with the ground's vibrations, made the dragons unsteady. "Roar! Roar!" Not to be outdone, they raised their heads and roared at Guan Qiong, who stood above Norma. "Things don't look good over there," Gilly suddenly said, as the three dragons at the edge of the pack looked at the center of the clashing dragons. Pierce and Charlie looked at him, awaiting his explanation. While the existence of dragon magic was uncertain, the dragons had a rudimentary language. Like most intelligent creatures, their roars could convey a wide range of meanings, much of which had been deciphered by those who studied it. Those dragons felt that having Guan Qiong stand above Norma was an insult to the pack and a detriment to the dragon race's dignity, Gilly explained to the two. Dragons are indeed proud creatures. Charlie looked over there with some concern. Guan Qiong, perched above Norma, understood the dragon sentiments. They seemed to think a human like him had no place there. This was perfectly normal. If he had suddenly spotted a goblin reading in the Hogwarts library, he'd probably have similar thoughts, though he wouldn't have expressed them so explicitly. Instead, he'd investigate to understand the circumstances surrounding their presence. Dragons, though intelligent, still deeply valued strength. Gently patting Norma's head to soothe him, Guan Qiong's body floated down from Norma's head and arrived before the dragons. Light burst from his hands, forming the forms of a massive dragon and a small human. A longsword emerged from the human's hand, and the dragon began to spit out light and flames, ensuing a battle between the two. The light animation, something he hadn't used since Norma's departure, was now apparent, and the Ridgeback dragons understood his intention. He was challenging the dragons to stop them from causing trouble. The black-gray Ridgebacks roared loudly, and one of them stomped out, arriving in front of Guan Qiong. Before it could move, Guan Qiong waved his hand lightly, and the Ridgeback dragon levitated. Then, with a flick of his finger, it flipped over and fell heavily to the ground. The levitation spell, with his immense magical power, was still quite effective at bullying dragons. Looking at the still-dazed Ridgebacks, Guan Qiong swung a point of light, which exploded in front of the second black-gray Ridgeback. The Ridgeback dragon let out a terrifying roar and charged towards Guan Qiong. The next second, the ground it stepped on softened, as if transformed from mud into a pool of water, knocking it off balance and sending it tumbling into a ball. It rolled out from below, tumbling into the lake. The softening spell, though rarely used, was just right in this situation. Immediately, a third Ridgeback charged out. This time, Guan Qiong used a puppet spell. He couldn't control a Ridgeback's entire body, but he could control a single leg. With that, the second dragon rolled into the lake. A fourth Ridgeback erupted in flames, but Guan Qiong summoned Jormungandr, drawing all of it away. This Ridgeback, the strongest besides Norma, was also gripped by Jormungandr's powerful coils, tightly bound and roaring in pain. This was the only Ridgeback Guan Qiong had subdued with his strength. Looking at the other Ridgebacks, all bowing their heads, Guan Qiong smiled and retracted Jormungandr, returning it to Norma's head. This time, no dragon objected. Roar, Norma roared, and the surrounding dragons bowed their heads in submission, even more respectful than before. Guan Qiong didn't react in any way, but the three outside were stunned. What exquisite magical methods, worthy of being recognized by Dumbledore. This kind of application of magic, I can't think of it even if I read Hogwarts again, Pierce said with some shame. He can also use the magic that Guan Qiong just used, but he can't grasp the timing of this application. Of course, the magic power is also a factor. If you were to use the levitation spell, I'm afraid he wouldn't even be able to lift the dragon's wings. Indeed, Gile also said in agreement. At this moment, Norma over there took Guan Qiong to a dragon in the tribe, humming something in her mouth, and gesturing with her two claws. Charlie and others looked over there in confusion, not knowing what was going on. After a while, Guan Qiong left Norma and returned to Charlie and the other two. Facing the puzzled eyes of the three, a light spot formed a sentence in front of them. Norma said that a dragon and its tribe seemed to be sick. Chapter 375, Dragons also have stones? Sick, Charlie repeated, turning to look at Pierce. Gilly, standing beside him, also looked over. Pierce was a dragon health specialist, so he had a deeper understanding of the subject. Take me in, Pierce said to Guan Qiong, seemingly unsurprised. It's normal for magical creatures in the wild to become ill. Whether it's from attacks by predators, the effects of the natural environment, or simply age, they can all develop a variety of ailments. Pierce would treat some of them as appropriate. The Society for the Preservation of Magical Creatures in the Wild has strict regulations, outlining which situations wizards can intervene in and which they should remain on the sidelines to maintain a balanced magical ecosystem. Fortunately, dragons have always been the only ones in need of treatment, as their numbers are relatively small. Both for biodiversity and the demand for magical materials, they are species worth protecting. Guan Qiong led Pierce, Gilly, and Charlie toward the dragon herd. Previously, they had only observed dragons from the outside, rarely entering directly into a herd. This was a completely new experience. The surrounding Ridgebacks bared their sharp teeth at Charlie and the other two, their orange red eyes surging with molten lava. However, when they noticed Guan Qiong, the one in the foreground, they all shut their mouths and tilted their heads to the side. The four of them made their way to the center of the dragons. Norma stood beside a young dragon, and and Guan Qiong and the others could see the helplessness in its ferocious eyes. It was a North Sea ridgeback, about 10 feet, 3 meters, long, roughly the same size as when Norma was brought here. The sharp spikes protruding from its wings were pale white, like spears weathered by the passage of time on the battlefield. The ridgeback lay on the ground, its wings drooping, listless. Seeing Guan Qiong and the others approach, it merely raised its eyelids, then lowered them again. Guan Qiong first reached out to touch Norma's head, then pointed at Charlie and the others. Gillet stepped forward, one hand clutching his throat, and roared a dragon's roar. "I communicate through language, heal." Gilly pointed at himself and Pearson spoke in the language of the ridgeback dragon. Norma nodded. He had seen the 3 people who came with Guan Qiong before, but he didn't pay much attention to them. Humans often come to this place. Some humans will help the dragons, but there are also some thieves who will hurt the dragons. Therefore, Norma is neither friendly nor disgusted with them, but just ignores them. Norma turned his head and looked at Charlie, who had not been introduced. His angular head nodded slightly. Charlie was an acquaintance of his. He often appeared here, and Norma still remembered him. Charlie's face immediately showed a happy expression. "Let me see what's going on." Seeing that Gilly had finished communicating, Pierce took a deep breath and walked towards the North Sea ridgeback dragon under the eyes of the surrounding dragons. To be honest, he was a little nervous. Previously, when examining and treating dragons, the researchers would always discover the dragon's problems and wait for it to become isolated, or use other methods to bring the injured dragon out for treatment. Now, he had to go in and treat it under the watchful eyes of the dragons. Honestly, this was a first. Some of the treatment and diagnostic methods were too bloody. And Pierce worried they might think he was attacking the young dragons, potentially causing a negative impact. However, Guan Qiong followed him forward. "I see something, but I don't know what it is, and I don't know what to do." Facing Pierce's gaze, dots of light formed a line in front of him. Then, with Guan Qiong's movements, the dots quickly formed into the shape of a dragon, revealing its head, wings, and entire body. Some of the dots even formed a dragon's skeleton and internal organs, following the biological circuitry Guan Qiong had discerned. "There's something extra here." Guan Qiong placed the dotted dragon image in front of Pierce and pointed to the dragon's throat. Inside, a mass of countless dots of light clung together, lodged like a rock. While it wasn't clear what it was, the shape of it clearly couldn't be bone or muscle. Pierce's eyes lit up at the point of light before Guan Qiong, but not at the strange object itself, but at Guan Qiong's entire gesture. "Can you see a dragon's entrails?" Pierce asked excitedly, his eyes gleaming as he stared at Guan Qiong. "No, just the veins and things like that," Guan Qiong explained his magical vision using Eastern terms. "That's not important. What's important is that you can see it. That's incredibly important. Do you have any ideas for staying here? I can apply for a separate research lab for you, and even apply for a class I care of magical creatures permit from the Ministry of Magic," Pierce said, his eyes filled with anticipation. "Hey, Pierce, Guan Qiong will be Dumbledore's successor. Are you trying to compete with Dumbledore for her?" Charlie said from the side. Pierce's gaze dimmed, but he still stared at Guan Qiong. "Sometimes, it all comes down to personal interest, right?" But Guan Qiong simply smiled at him kindly, the points of light before her forming a line of rejection. "Let's take a look at this young dragon first." Guan Qiong was naturally happy to protect magical creatures, but he didn't want to make it his job. To be honest, he hadn't decided what he wanted to do in the future. Perhaps being an explorer or a traveler, riding travelogues would be a good idea. Pierce was a little disappointed, but he didn't say anything else. He turned to look at the light model in front of Guan Qiong, observing the location of the dense light spots and comparing it to the current state of the young North Sea ridgeback dragon. "It looks like a stone in the fire gland. It must have consumed too much flint, and the unabsorbed part has accumulated there," Pierce said. "Ordinary matter swallowed by a dragon will melt in the flames, even if it's not dissolved by the acid. But flint is not afraid of fire, so it's stuck in the middle," Pierce continued to explain. "What should we do?" Guan Qiong asked. "Just smash it inside its body and make it spit it out. However, this requires controlling it, and one person needs to reach deep into its mouth and cast a Decision spell at the right spot. This will penetrate the flesh and blood, and it is very likely to irritate it and cause it to riot," Pierce said, looking not only at the young dragon, but also at the other dragons. The riot didn't just affect this young dragon, but also the others. While they were intelligent, they couldn't comprehend profound things. If they saw them using magic on a young dragon and harming it, they would most likely go berserk. Chapter 376 The Romanian trip ends. After hearing Pierce's words, Guan Qiong simply nodded. Tell me the location and strength of the magic you need to cast, and I'll do it. The light points in front of him formed into the sentence, causing Pierce to frown. Honestly, I don't think we need to take such a risk. We can just wait until night or some other time, come quietly, take it away alone for treatment, and that's how we've always done it, Pierce couldn't help but say. It's okay, Guan Qiong simply nodded to Pierce. Seeing the unconvinced eyes of the three people beside him, he extended a finger and pointed it at a nearby stone. A magic circuit took shape and fell onto the stone, but no movement was observed. When Guan Qiong used the levitation and cutting spells to open the stone, the other three discovered that the stone had shattered into several pieces, completely lost its shape. I can let the magic pass through it without damaging it, although it will be a bit more troublesome, Guan Qiong explained to the three people. Unlike other wizards who rely on visual contact to cast magic, Guan Qiong's magic relies on magical circuits and magical vision, allowing for penetrating effects. However, when used on living things, this type of magic requires breaking through their own life circuits. Therefore, Guan Qiong mostly bombards them directly with magic. However, since this was a lithotripsy operation, Guan Qiong naturally wouldn't cast magic directly from the outside. She had just asked Pierce to confirm the nature of the object and to determine the solution. If it was a polyp, destructive spells like the crush or cut spell wouldn't work. Instead, a locking spell would be used to lock the adjacent life circuits, allowing them to naturally die. Are you sure you don't want to come to the research institute? Your talent is perfect for this place, Pierce couldn't help but ask. I think he'd be perfect for anywhere, Gilly said with a wry smile, staring at the stone in a daze. This was beyond their comprehension. They could break or cut a stone, but to leave the outside intact while the inside was shredded was a challenge. It was unthinkable. This was a gap in magical understanding. No, I'm only in 4th grade. I still have time to think about the future, Guan Qiong declined Pierce's invitation. Alright, Pierce sighed and began to discuss the cutting process with Guan Qiong. Don't cut it too finely, so it can come together again. Just cut it into about 16 pieces. The dragon will be able to spit it out at this size. Of course, if you can still control it, try not to create any sharp edges or cut its throat. Even if its scales are tough, its internal organs are still tender. I understand, Guan Qiong nodded. He then beckoned Norma to lower her head. Light condensed in his hand into a pattern, reflected in Norma's eyes. The pattern showed a giant dragon pinning down a small dragon, immobilizing it except for its mouth. Roar, Norma growled softly, nodded, and then pressed a claw against the wings of the young North Sea Ridgeback dragon. The wings spread out and pressed against its body, completely immobilizing it. Roar, the North Sea Ridgeback struggled, but quieted under Norma's control. Then, Guan Qiong gently raised his hand, and the puppet spell seized the dragon's head, separating its upper and lower jaws, revealing sharp teeth and a scarlet tongue. It felt as if a 3-meter-long crocodile had opened its mouth to him. But Guan Qiong no longer saw the dragon's open mouth. Instead, the dragon before him transformed into a pattern of green lines, and at its throat, a mass of condensed matter glowed red. Then, Guan Qiong extended his hand, and a ball of magic emerged from it, pressing against the dragon's life circuit, creating a slight rupture. The dragon inevitably moved. Though Guan Qiong's movements were gentle, like a mosquito bite, it still felt uncomfortable, like an itch it wanted to scratch. But Norma's grip on its body prevented it from moving. Then, a gap wide enough for magic to enter appeared. Guan Qiong's magic entered the dragon's body and transformed into a sickle pattern at the location where the lump had clumped. A cutting spell. As Guan Qiong gently clenched her fist, the sickle began to swing, slicing the lump of stone in half, and then into 4 pieces, top and bottom. The dragon struggled again, this time feeling the itch in its own body, as if something was surging in its throat. However, because the sensation was mild, it only struggled briefly before Norma ruthlessly pinned it down again. It was just a minor discomfort, bearable. But as Guan Qiong cut more, the dragon's throat began to surge, as if something was stuck in it, and a bulge appeared, visible even from the outside. At this time, Guan Qiong signaled Norma to let the dragon go. As Norma released the dragon it leaped to its feet, crawling on all 4s to the lake's edge. Its throat surged as it spat out stone after stone into the water. Then, it began to gulp down the water, relishing it more than ever before. "Looks like a success," Pierce said with a hearty smile, watching the dragonite in the distance. It had already begun to breathe fire near the lake. Previously, perhaps to expel fire faster, it had ingested a large amount of flint, but the undigested material had become lodged in its fire glands, causing a blockage every time it tried to breathe fire. Now, it could finally breathe fire freely. "Yes," Guan Qiong nodded. Norma, standing beside it, roared with joy, lifted Guan Qiong onto his head, and roared to the dragons in joy. The dragons roared in response, their voices deafening. The dragon migration takes about 2 weeks. They must find a suitable cave to spend the winter in and capture sufficient prey nearby to survive the harsh winter. During this time, Guan Qiong and the others followed Norma's herd, closely observing their movements. From selecting a cave based on its aura, to battling the inhabitants, to settling down, Guan Qiong and the others witnessed the entire process, and Charlie and the other 3 also gained valuable first-hand information. As for Guan Qiong, he simply witnessed everything unfold until Norma let out a roar from the cave that shook the entire Gamma mountain range. Only then did he, Charlie, and the others leave the dragon herd. Because the Quidditch World Cup was about to begin. Without a moment's sympathy for JGD's defeat, they immediately rushed to the battlefield. WBG. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.